Chapter 291. Downia, Situ Downia, this stinky bare flat-chested brat actually exuded a graceful, gentle, steady, mature and elegant feminine aura. It was like seeing a ghost in broad daylight. When she went out, she was a bear brat, and when she came back, she became an elegant wife. The change in temperament wasn't something that could be achieved simply by changing her hairstyle and clothes. It can't be. Downia. Could it be? She and Raito really, what's wrong? Colored Glaze senpai, your expression is getting weirder and weirder. Just as Colored Glaze was thinking about the impossible answer in her heart, Downia revealed a devilish smirk and said to Colored Glaze in a proud tone. For some reason, Downia's body exuded a powerful aura. How should this aura be described? It was like a harem empress, managing the harem on behalf of the emperor. What's going on? Why did she suddenly become so magnanimous? And what's with the arrogance and calmness of a victor? Hee. When Colored Glaze couldn't help but take a deep breath and wanted to get to the bottom of it, Downia smiled. What are you smiling at? I'm smiling at how you have the guts to think nonsense, but don't have the guts to say it. Hearing this, Colored Glaze's body slightly stiffened. She didn't know if it was because Raito opened her governor and conception meridian, or if it was because she stepped onto the steps of an adult and became smarter. What was unexpected was that Downia actually saw through Colored Glaze's thoughts. It felt as if a polar bear suddenly picked up a keyboard and started typing, and it was as ridiculous as Tokyo Villain's love game. For a moment, Colored Glaze was shocked speechless by this ridiculous change, and Union's gaze was also filled with suspicion. Okay, I'll confess. Being stared at by two pairs of obviously distrustful eyes, Downia smiled and waved her hand, showing an I surrender look. Yunyang also slightly sighed in relief and asked with a smile, why didn't you just say it earlier? What interesting thing did you encounter when you traveled with Raito? Tell me about it. It's nothing, it's just that I became an adult with him. What? When Downia said those words in a light tone while drinking vodka, the surrounding air. I became an adult with him, together, that's all. It was a simple line of words, but it contained a lot of incredible information. After all, generally speaking, there were many ways to become adults. However, there was probably only one way for a man and a woman to become adults together. That way was stealing, eating, forbidden, fruit. In other words, Downia's words meant that she and Raito already had a relationship, and it was a relationship between a man and a woman. In an instant, Colored Glaze was petrified, Yunyang was stunned, and Downia, on the other hand, puffed up her chest, put her hands on her waist, and put on the posture of a victor. How about it? Do you know what it means to overtake on a curve? No matter how far the two of you ran before, this young lady can directly pass by and leave you far behind. Thinking of this, Downia's mouth curled up, and her expression was extremely cute. A while ago, she felt the same way when she saw Raito being intimate with Yunyang and Colored Glaze. Now that the two behind her knew that she overtook them, she felt the same way. Perhaps even more so. She really got her revenge. How? How is that possible? I don't believe it. After a moment, Colored Glaze said in a low voice, with a look of disbelief. How is that possible? Why would Raito make a move on Downia? If he made a move on Yunyang, Colored Glaze could still understand. After all, Yunyang was full of feminine charm. She was beautiful, had big breasts, a thin waist, a round butt, and long legs. It was normal for Raito to not be able to resist the temptation. But what the hell was Downia? Apart from his face, this stinky brat had nothing else. How could she possibly be the first to take the lead? Something was wrong, right? You don't believe it, right? Downia heard this and grinned. She took out her phone from her pocket and waved it at Colored Glaze. I have some photos here that can be used as evidence. Do you want to see them? Photos? Could it be those photos? In an instant, Colored Glaze and Yunyang looked at the phone in Downia's hand. Especially the former, her eyes were about to spit fire. Yunyang, on the other hand, was much more open-minded. She quickly leaned over and put her head on Downia's shoulder. She smiled and said, Aya, is it true? I really want to see it. If Yunyang wants to see it, then it's definitely possible. Suddenly, Downia narrowed her eyes and looked at colored glaze. Then, she swiped her phone and showed some of the strange photos she had recently collected. After seeing the photo, Yunyang covered her mouth in surprise. Wow, that's amazing. Hehe, amazing, right? There's even more amazing. Phut. Ha ha ha. This photo of Raito's expression is a little funny. Indeed, that guy's expression is quite funny sometimes. It's easy to get out of character. Sigh, I'm so envious. Speaking of which, didn't you feel pain at that time? A little at first, but you'll get used to it. Besides, he's quite gentle. On the other side, Yunyang and Downia were laughing and looking at some strange photos, happily exchanging their experiences. On the other side, colored glaze was as uncomfortable as if she had eaten a fly. She raised the teacup with trembling hands and tried to pretend that she didn't care about the situation over there, but in fact, I want to see it, I want to see it, I want to see it so much. When the young miss of Kamiyoshi looked at the scene where the two were looking at the photos, her heart was already screaming crazily. How could she not care? After all, she had never done those things with Raito before. Not only did Downia take the lead, she even took photos as a souvenir. It was simply too. It was too enviable. She cared so much about what was in those photos. However, although colored glaze really wanted to see the contents of those photos, she couldn't beg Downia. After all, the two of them had always been on bad terms. Therefore, colored glaze, who was originally kneeling on the tablecloth, quietly moved her petite but slightly towards Downia's direction. After moving a little, seeing that Downia didn't respond, colored glaze began to move again, using her butt as a belt, and her waist as a belt to move her legs. Not long after, her body was getting closer and closer to Downia's position, and the corner of her eyes could gradually see the light on the phone over there. I'm about to see it. Look, but at this moment, Downia suddenly turned off the phone and smiled. Hey, I've seen enough. Let's continue eating. F***ck. In an instant, colored glaze almost fell to the side. She hurriedly held onto the tablecloth with her hand, supported her slender waist, and looked at Downia with resentment. Colored glaze senpai, why are you looking at me like that? Don't tell me you want to see it too. After noticing the resentful gaze, Downia pretended to widen her eyes in surprise, and said to colored glaze with a puzzled tone. However, the triumphant look on her face couldn't be concealed. That's right, Downia was indeed the winner. After all, as an adult, there was a qualitative difference between her and colored glaze and Yunyang. This wasn't something that could be made up by the difference in intelligence. Just like that, this rare three-person lunch ended with Downia's victory. Lioli, on the other hand, angrily ran to Longdo's house after school and vented her anger on this bastard. She didn't leave until very late at night. As for how colored glaze kicked up a fuss, and how Raito comforted her, that was something that couldn't be said in detail. But that afternoon, when Yunyang returned to Tsukuminari Kojo, an unexpected storm slowly blew in her house. When she returned to the living room, the first thing Yunyang saw was her father sitting on the sofa. He didn't look too good, so she asked with a smile, "Dad, why are you back so early today?" Yunyang's father, Tsukujiri Kyoji, was an elegant man with a scholarly aura. He had good facial features, wore square glasses, and always wore a decent white suit. He was the type that would attract attention wherever he went. Usually, Kyoji always had a gentle smile on his face as if he was a nice guy who would never get angry. But today, Kyoji wasn't like that. "Yunyang, come sit here." After seeing his daughter, the CEO of Tsukuminari Group patted the sofa next to him and said in a tone that made people feel bad. "This feeling. Father seems to want to scold me. Did I do something wrong recently?" Since young, Kyoji rarely scolded Yunyang. After all, Yunyang, the daughter of the Tsukuminari Group, had always been very obedient. There was nothing to scold her about. But today, Kyoji was different. His face was serious, and his eyes were like lightning. His tone also sounded like he expected better from his daughter, as if he was very disappointed in her. So Yunyang deliberately sat opposite Kyoji and asked with a smile, "Dad, what's wrong today?" Are you going to scold me? Take a look at this. The next moment, Kyoji took out a few photos from the folder beside him and threw them on the table between the two. This is. Oh, so that's what it is. Yunyang picked up the photo and looked at it. It was the scene of Raito and Downia intimately holding each other's shoulders as they walked into the school. Now, Yunyang knew why her father was angry. It was because Kyoji already knew that his daughter was dating that extreme leader. But now, his daughter's boyfriend was being intimate with another woman in public. As a father-in-law, it would be strange if he wasn't angry. Chapter 292. But after looking at the photos, Yunyang said with a relaxed smile, "Dad, what are you trying to say by showing me these photos?" "What am I trying to say? Do you still need to ask?" "Break up with Raito Kiri immediately." Seeing his daughter's relaxed expression, Kyoji's eyes became sharper. Actually, when he knew that his daughter was dating the second-generation leader of the Rulon group, Kyoji's first reaction was to firmly oppose it. After all, Raito that person. Almost all of Tokyo's residents knew that he wasn't a good person. Although the trip to the Kokyo unexpectedly gave him a lot of popularity, the upper class still didn't treat him as a decent person. Such an extreme dojo leader actually got his cute and generous daughter. When Kyoji heard the news, he was so angry that he almost wanted to find Raito and scold him, but Shunchin stopped her husband. "Don't worry, isn't Raito a good kid? What's wrong with him dating Yunyang?" "Yes. But that guy is extreme dojo. He's not a decent person. So what if his extreme dojo?" Mrs. Ruehue also praised him a lot. "Don't tell me you think you're as good at judging people as Ruehue?" This. After his wife used Ruehue to suppress him, Kyoji was immediately silenced. Kyoji himself was one of the 12 members of the Yatsuki Dark Crow, so he was naturally very familiar with the leader of the Kamiyoshi clan, and he also knew how powerful Ruehue was. If Raito was just an ordinary delinquent, then he definitely wouldn't have received Ruehue's approval, so he must have some outstanding strengths. As for what those strengths were, perhaps only Ruehue and Downia knew. In this case, Kyoji could only acquiesce to his daughter's relationship with Raito. However, he also ordered Yunyang to go back to the Eugen villa every day to prevent his daughter from being taken away by that pig on a dark and windy night if he didn't keep a close eye on her. It had to be said that Gong Sai had great foresight. Otherwise, with Yunyan's personality, she wouldn't have waited until now. Raito would have eaten her clean. Downia wouldn't have had the chance to take the lead. But it was clear that although Kyoji could keep an eye on his daughter, he couldn't keep an eye on that bastard Raito. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect that bastard to flirt with another woman while he was dating his own daughter. Moreover, the other party was the eldest daughter of the Saitu family. This was simply outrageous. Break up, we must break up. Therefore, when Yunyang came back tonight, Kyoji gave his daughter an absolute order to force her to break up with Raito no matter what. However, Yunyang lightly shook her head and said without a care, "Dad, you misunderstood. Actually, I know about him and Downia." "What?" The moment he heard this, Kyoji was stunned. "Did I hear wrong? My daughter said that her boyfriend was flirting with another woman, she knew about it. And she was still so calm when she knew about it." After being stunned for a moment, Kyoji suspiciously asked, "Then you?" "That's right, you don't actually like that delinquent, right? That's why you don't care about his cheating." No, I like Raito very much." "Then if you like him, how can you tolerate him flirting outside?" "I like Raito, but I also like Downia, what's wrong with that?" She. This. After hearing Yunyan's overly provocative words, Kyoji couldn't help but widen his eyes as if he couldn't understand what the young people were thinking. Yunyang liked Raito, and also liked Downia. Didn't that mean she was a double-edged sword? Just thinking about his daughter being entangled with a man and a woman, Kyoji almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Damn it. It must be that bastard Raito Kiri who led my obedient daughter astray. I can't let Yunyang continue like this. At this time, Kyoji took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "We'll move abroad tomorrow." You should also prepare to transfer schools. You can't stay here anymore. Huh? Move. Transfer schools? Hearing her father's words, Yunyang finally realized that she was in big trouble. Kyoji seemed to be serious. In Kyoji's view, if his daughter continued like this, she would definitely become a hopeless woman, so he had to get her away from this terrible environment. Therefore, Kyoji decided to move immediately. He planned to take the whole family to a place where Raito Kiri wouldn't be able to find them. Even if it was an uninhabited island, it would be better than staying in Tokyo. As for this sudden decision, Yunyang naturally couldn't accept it. She quickly stood up from the chair and shouted at her father. Wait, wasn't this a little too presumptuous? I don't want to move, and I don't want to transfer schools. Shut up. If you weren't entangled with that hoodlum, I wouldn't be this angry. Raito isn't a hoodlum. He's my boyfriend. Please watch your words when you speak. Although Kyoji was obviously very angry, Yunyang wasn't to be outdone. Don't forget, Yunyang was originally the type with big guts. She dared to go out with Raito to watch a deathmatch in the underground arena in the middle of the night. She even dared to sneak into someone's bed. Her guts were simply too big. Therefore, in this living room, Yunyang couldn't help but quarrel with her father. The father and daughter scolded louder and louder, and the more they scolded, the angrier they got. Now your wings have hardened, right? You dare to speak loudly to me. You can say whatever you want about me, but you can't scold Raito. He's innocent. He's innocent. That little bastard hugs women left and right, and he's innocent. Drag him out and hang him as a street lamp. You. If you say that again, I'm going to get angry. I'm going to get angry. Tomorrow we'll transfer schools and move. I won't allow you to see that stinky hoodlum again. Oh. Transfer schools, right? Move, right? Wait and see. After hearing her father's resolute words, Yunyang couldn't help but clench her teeth. Then, without looking back, she ran out of the living room and ran towards her bedroom. Bang! While running back to her bedroom, Yunyang immediately locked the door from the inside. Then, she picked up her phone and called Raito. Beep 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 beep. Not long after, the phone was connected. Raito's familiar voice came from the other side. Yunyang? Calling at this time, do you want to? Without waiting for Raito to finish, Yunyang said in a serious tone, Father wants me to transfer schools tomorrow. Come pick me up immediately. I want to run away from home. Ah! Run away from home? No way, right? After hearing Yunyang's words, Raito was stunned. Because why does this plot sound a bit familiar? In the original Yunyang's timeline of Red Album 2, No Survivors, Miss Tsuchiki chose to run away from home because her family didn't allow her to be a full-time novelist and forced her to work at her own company. She took the main character and ran away overnight. And in this world, although the current Yunyang had yet to graduate, she seemed to have fallen out with her family because of the matter between her and him. In the end, she still made the same choice. It could only be said that as expected of the young mistress of the Pry family, she had to do the same in every world. But since Yunyang already said so, Raito immediately hung up the phone and called Narukai to drive to Tsuchiki Kojo. But when Raito arrived at the entrance of Tsuchiki Kojo, a few bodyguards quickly surrounded Raito and raised their hands. Sorry, we won't be receiving any guests tonight. Please go back. Not receiving guests tonight. Are they afraid that Yunyang will take the opportunity to run away? Seems like Kyoji didn't completely understand his daughter. After hearing the bodyguard's words, Raito revealed a slight smile and then suddenly disappeared from the spot. Almost in the blink of an eye, the bodyguards surrounding Long Do fell to the ground at the same time and lost consciousness one after another. They didn't even understand how they were put down. After all, to the current Raito, normal bodyguards were like non-existent. Even if there were 100 or 80 of them, they couldn't stop him. At this time, Kyoji, who was at home, received a message from the butler and knew that bastard Raito was about to break into the house. Raito Kiri? That guy dares to come. Kyoji took a deep breath and shouted to the butler, let him go. Don't let that bastard step into the house. Yes, I'll go mobilize. Sorry, I'm already in. Just as the butler was about to mobilize more people to stop the Rulong group leader, a frivolous voice came from outside the living room. What? What? Under the stunned gaze of Kyoji and the butler, the young figure, Raito Kiri, slowly appeared from the darkness and walked into the house with an indifferent expression. How is it possible? There are at least 30 to 40 bodyguards outside. Could it be that in such a short time, after feeling the gaze of the two, Raito walked toward Yunyan's room while smiling at his future father-in-law? Don't look at me like that, I'll leave right away, I won't stay for too long. You're trespassing. Ahem. Originally, Kyoji wanted to yell at him, "You're trespassing," but then he realized that this guy was the leader of the extreme Dao. It would be strange if he cared about such a small thing. Damn it. This bastard. Seeing that Raito was about to walk toward Yunyan's room, Kyoji suddenly took out a button from his pocket and pressed it. Buzz. 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 Buzz, accompanied by a series of rapid buzzes, 5 multi-axis rotor microdrones that were slightly larger than footballs quickly flew in from outside the house and aimed their cannons at Long Do's body. When Raito first met Yunyang, she also used these drones once. It was a high-tech automatic defense system that Kyoji equipped for himself, his wife, and his daughter. Although the drones looked small, the small muzzle could fire hundreds of powerful tranquilizer bullets in a second. Even an elephant would be taken down in the blink of an eye. Whoosh. Bang. But before Kyoji could order the drones to attack, 5 small steel balls flew out like bullet. The 5 drones were smashed into smithereens. Chapter 293. Is this guy a human? Although Gong Sai didn't practice martial arts, his eyesight was quite good. At that moment, he vaguely saw Long Do swinging his right hand without looking back. He directly threw out 5 steel balls from his hand and shot down 5 drones. Although they were miniature drones, the precision machines made by the Tsukujiri group could meet military standards in all aspects. Even if they were shot a few times, they might not fall, let alone be smashed with steel balls. In other words, the steel balls Raito threw out were more powerful than bullets. Isn't this nonsense? How can a human do this? If you have this ability, why don't you go fight monsters and save the world? However, just as Gong Sai's face turned pale from the shock, Raito leisurely walked down the hallway and came to Yunyan's room. Knock knock. He elegantly knocked on the door and smiled. Yunyang. I'm here, open the door. Before he finished, the door opened and Yunyan's figure suddenly pounced on Raito. You're fast, let's go. After hugging her boyfriend, Yunyang rewarded him with a kiss on the cheek, then excitedly hugged Raito and walked out. Suddenly, Gong Sai, who chased after them, saw his daughter hugging another man affectionately. He was so angry that he almost had a heart attack. Don't leave, little bastard. If you take her away, I'll. Shish. Long Do didn't wait for Gong Sai to finish, and he made a shushing gesture. Those who threatened me before didn't have a good ending. You're my future father-in-law, I don't want you to end up like that. Otherwise, Yunyang will be sad. Raito's tone sounded very calm. It was far from a threat, but the threat was self-evident. The moment he heard these words, Kyoji felt a chill run down his spine, and a chill ran down his spine. It was hard to imagine that the CEO of a large conglomerate was scared to the point that his body trembled and he couldn't move. When Raito left with Yunyang, the butler who was standing on the side walked over with cold sweat and said to his master, Kosha-sama, I'm sorry. Sorry, what's the point of being sorry? What do I pay you for? To watch the show? After seeing the butler who was said to be a spy, Gong Sai couldn't help but yell at him in a harsh tone. Since Raito entered the room, the butler had been standing there motionless. People who didn't know him would think he was a block of wood. Tong Sheng Ryukyu had come knocking on their door to take the young miss away, yet the butler, who was supposed to be her bodyguard, didn't do anything to stop him. Even if he couldn't stop him in the end, he still had to put up a front. Wasn't this professional ethics? Who knew that the butler shook his head and said, It's not that I don't want to move, but if I move, I'll be beheaded on the spot. At that time, there'll be no turning back. What? Gong Sai was shocked when he heard the butler's words. Although this sentence sounded a little unbelievable, it was the truth. In fact, the moment Long Do entered the room, the butler was already prepared to attack. He was ready to draw his gun from his waist. However, before he could pull out his gun, an aura akin to that of a death god locked him in place. "Don't move. If you pull out your gun, I'll kill you." Although Raito didn't say a word, his aura had already imprinted this sentence in the butler's mind. "We'll die. If I pull out my gun, I'll die here." Under this strong threat of death, the butler could only watch with cold sweat as Raito took the young lady away. Looking at the direction Raito left, the butler sighed and said, "Kosha-sama, that guy is a complete monster. There aren't many forces in this world that can stop him. It's better not to completely fall out with him." "What do you mean? You want me to watch my daughter be taken away by that bastard? What else? Does Kosha-sama want to pay with your life? Using your life in exchange for Miss Yunyan's disgust and hatred towards him? It's not worth it." After hearing the butler's words, Gong Sai didn't know how to react. Of course, in reality, Raito couldn't kill Gong Sai. After all, he was his father-in-law. Even if he fell out with him, he would at most teach him a lesson. But the problem was that Gong Sai and the butler didn't know this. They only felt that Raito was a monster. Too scary. Is this the leader of the Rulong Group and the Black Hand Alliance? Is this really a 16 or 17-year-old young man? Thinking of this, the president of the Tsukujiri group couldn't help but take a deep breath. But at this time, Gong Sai seemed to understand why his daughter liked Raito so much. After all, from the girl's point of view, the action of the leader rushing in to take away his girlfriend was very manly. It was much better than the boy toy in this era. But what should he do now? Yunyang ran away with that guy. Wasn't this sending a sheep to the tiger's mouth? At the thought that his daughter might be taken by a pig tonight, Gong Sai's face turned into the color of pig liver. But even so, other than hurriedly contacting his acquaintances to call the police and think of a way to stop Long Do, he could only stay at home and silently pray that that bastard Long Do would not make a move on Yunyang so quickly. From a certain point of view, Gong Sai's prayer was complete nonsense. Because what he didn't know was that his daughter wasn't a cabbage being taken by a pig, she was the one taking the initiative to take someone. He, ha 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 ha. At the same time, in the back seat of the car with the Rulong Group's coat of arms, Yunyang was laughing happily. Ever since Long Do picked her up from her home, senior sister Yunyang had been very excited. At this time, she didn't even want to sit on Long Do's lap. She even reached out and hugged her boyfriend's neck. This extremely hot scene made the driver, Narukai, unable to stand it. He quickly pulled down the partition and put on his headphones. He made a "I can't see anything, I can't hear anything" gesture. Seeing Yunyan's happy expression, Raito smiled and said to her, "Okay, now you've successfully run away from home, right? That's what you wanted." Long Do knew that senior sister Yunyang had always been the type who liked to take the initiative to pursue excitement. For her, running away from home with her boyfriend after quarreling with her father, this kind of incomparably exciting action obviously touched the young girl's nerves, making her so happy that she couldn't close her mouth. But when she heard Raito's words, Yunyang smiled in his ear and said, "Running away from home was successful, but it's not enough. It's far from enough, I want more." "Oh. Then what do you want?" "Stay at my house for the night," Raito said as he reached out and hugged his girlfriend's slender waist, and a hint of excitement flashed in his eyes. In fact, in the past few months, Yunyang had been firmly watched by Gong Sai. Basically, she had no chance to have intimate contact with Raito, which made Raito feel particularly uncomfortable. Especially after eating downia on this trip to Moscow, Raito was obviously looking forward to Yunyang. After all, even a flat loli like downia could bring him so much joy. Yunyang, the type who had a good figure and knew how to play. It was really unbearable to think about. So on this night when Yunyang ran away from home, it was just right. Hee. Thinking of this, Raito's face couldn't help but show a weird expression, especially when he felt Yunyang's perky buttocks sitting on his lap. He was even more energetic. Yunyang's figure was excellent. She was the type who was not fat but had meat. The feeling of holding her was warm and soft. She was not on the same level as Downia, who would touch his bones. He would definitely feel good. But just when Raito was imagining a strange scene in his mind, Yunyang in his arms shook her head and said, "It's not bad to stay at your house, but since I ran away from home, I want to go somewhere far away." Somewhere far away. For example, Paris, France. I want to see the Eiffel Tower with you and then kiss on the top of the tower. Should I say, as expected of Yunyang, this idea is really playful. Although it's a bit complicated. Go to Paris. It's not impossible under normal circumstances, but we definitely can't take a plane now. After hearing his girlfriend's request, Raito couldn't help but reach out and scratch his head. It could be foreseen that Tsukujiri Kyoji must be furious now because his daughter was taken away, and the police would arrest Raito for kidnapping. Although this crime would become a joke because of Yunyan's return, it also meant that Yunyang must take the initiative to go back, otherwise, it would not be a joke, and she would really be wanted by the police. In other words, before Yunyang went back, the two of them definitely couldn't take a civil plane to Paris, and this black car alone couldn't drive to Paris. But even so, even if there were such difficulties, Raito wanted to fulfill his girlfriend's wish as much as possible. So Raito nodded to Yunyang and smiled. "Wait a minute, let me make a call to confirm. If I remember correctly, Kai Yang seems to have something that can help. Let's ask him." Thinking of this, Raito dialed Kai Yang's mobile phone and asked if that thing was still in his hands. "That thing? No problem. Anyway, it's just there. You can come and drive it away." For Raito's request, Kai Yang didn't hesitate for a moment and directly told him that thing was now in the warehouse in the area. In this way, Raito quickly asked Narukai to drive in the direction Kai Yang said. It didn't take long for him to take Yunyang to a large warehouse near the remote seaside of Tokyo Bay. Parked in the center of the warehouse was a private jet that didn't look very big. It could seat 2 or 3 people at most. When she saw the plane, Yunyang suddenly covered her mouth with excitement because she didn't think that there was a self-driving tour to Paris. It was so exciting that this young lady was so excited that she couldn't even straighten her back. Chapter 294. Kai Yang's private jet was said to be a good thing he received from a fugitive warlord. It didn't cost much, but it was excellent. It was definitely worth it. Because of the omnipotent pilot passive skill of 100% proficiency, Raito could almost perfectly pilot all the vehicles in the world, so he got on the plane on the spot and flew all the way to the west with Yunyang. Boom. Boom 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 boom. As the jet ignited and quickly moved forward on the simple runway in front, it soared into the sky and soared in the dark night sky. Yunyang, sitting behind Raito, was unconsciously immersed in the beautiful night sky. Dusk shrouded the dusky Tokyo, and the dark sky was twinkling with sparkling diamond-like stars. Especially when sitting on this small jet, it was closer to the starry sky than sitting on a large passenger plane, as if the dazzling stars were within reach. It's so beautiful. Is this the feeling of flying in the sky? The surrounding night sky and clouds flashed behind quickly. To be honest, the feeling of riding this kind of jet was somewhat bumpy, but the surrounding stars quickly made Yunyang addicted to it. Because it was already night, Yunyang slowly fell asleep under the panoramic night sky unknowingly. It's really a perfect trip away from home. Before finally falling asleep, Yunyang couldn't help but think so, and then she fell into a sweet dream. From Tokyo to Paris, even if it was a straight line, it was a long distance of more than 9,000 kilometers, and it had to pass through many countries. Fortunately, the jet provided by Kai Yang had all the necessary documents to fly in various countries, and he immediately used his own connections to ensure that Long Do would not be intercepted on the way to Paris. So after nearly 10 hours of flight and landing to refuel, when the next morning came, the plane was already parked in a manor on the outskirts of Paris. This manor was said to be the property of a Chinese chamber of commerce in Paris. Kai Yang, who had a lot of people, greeted the boss there and got permission to land, allowing Raito to temporarily park the plane there. Sway. At this time, Yunyang was still sleeping, but she suddenly felt that her body seemed to be floating, and then her surroundings began to shake slightly. What's going on? After an unknown amount of time, Yunyang opened her eyes in a daze. Immediately after, An incomparably gorgeous scene appeared before the young girl's eyes. Although it was the beginning of winter in October, outside the window of Yunyang's vision, a field of huge sunflowers was blooming like flames in the wilderness of Paris. The sunflowers seemed to be burning with life, setting off the beautiful and tranquil scenery of the lake and mountains not far away. Together with the faintly visible ancient and exquisite art buildings in the surrounding mountain villages, it looked even more fascinating under the morning sun. "Oh, you're awake." When Yunyang was unconsciously shocked by the beautiful scenery outside the window, a familiar voice came from the side. Yunyang turned her head and saw Raito handing over a bottle of mineral water with a smile. Coincidentally, Yunyang also felt thirsty at this time, so she took the bottle and drank. After drinking, Yunyang found that the two were sitting in a luxurious car. The driver in front was a white-haired old gentleman. The car was driving on a neat, desolate mountain road, surrounded by beautiful natural scenery. Seeing Yunyang woke up, the old gentleman in front turned his head slightly and greeted with a smile, "Bonjour, mademoiselle, good morning, miss." Because Yunyang often traveled to and from different countries since she was young, she could speak most of the languages of many countries. Thus, she replied without hesitation, "Bonjour." "Hey, wait. Could it be?" After saying bonjour, she realized that the old gentleman was actually speaking French to her. Could it be that he was speaking French? No way, right? Thinking of this, Yunyang couldn't help but feel a little dreamy. She just ran away from home last night, and then said that she was running away from home to go to Paris with a hint of willfulness. As a result, she woke up in Paris. She was tens of thousands of miles away. Don't be surprised. We are indeed in France now, and we are rushing to the city of Paris. This is Mr. Bernard, the person responsible for receiving us. It seemed that he felt that Yunyang's confused look was a little cute. Raito patted her head gently, and then introduced the old gentleman in front of him. Mr. Bernard was the old butler responsible for managing the manor where the plane was parked. Kai Yang asked the owner of the manor to take care of his friend, so Raito and Yunyang were warmly entertained by the owner after they got off the plane. Originally, Raito just wanted to borrow a car from them and drive from the suburbs to Paris, but the old butler insisted on sending them, which led to the current scene. While the wheels were moving, it didn't take long for a city with a strong artistic atmosphere and rich life to slowly appear in front of Yunyang's eyes. When it came to Paris, there was always a very strange feeling because there was always a feeling that time seemed to stop flowing here. People often praised the changes in emerging cities, but such changes absolutely did not exist in Paris. Those old and full of artistic buildings stood in the same place day after day, year after year. The historic Champs-Élysées, the white and sacred Arc de Triomphe, the magnificent Palace of Versailles, the elegant and dignified Notre Dame de Paris, the towering Eiffel Tower in the square of the God of War, and the Seine River flowing quietly under the tower, all of them spoke of the charm of this city. When Raito entered the city, he felt the natural romantic sentiment of the French, as well as the spirit that somewhat confused the Orientals. The Orientals pursued the idea of man conquering nature. Even if there were thousands of huge waves, they would go against the current, like a fish leaping over the dragon gate to become a dragon. If they failed, they would die. But the French liked to go with the flow. Wherever the waves hit, people would lie there. Compared to going against the current, they obviously preferred to raise their hands. It didn't take long for the two to bid farewell to the enthusiastic old gentleman Bernard and stroll on the Champs-Élysées. It was early in the morning. Because they had been flying all night and hadn't eaten anything until now, Yunyang found that she was already dizzy from hunger. She pulled Raito to find a coffee shop and sat down outside. The outdoor coffee shops in Paris were very famous. Walking on the streets and alleys, one could see exquisite chairs placed outside, people sitting and drinking coffee while enjoying delicious food. However, because of the hunger, Yunyang didn't plan to choose carefully. After sitting down, she hurriedly ordered a few food and drinks, then held Raito's hand and waited for the food to arrive. Perhaps it was because the two were in the city of romance, Yunyang seemed to be cuter than usual after coming here, especially her little eyes looking into the shop, eager to see when her breakfast would be served. Raito couldn't stop looking at her. He wanted to hug her, pat her head, and pat her back. Fortunately, it didn't take long for the well-dressed waiter to serve the signature delicacies of the coffee shop. An apple pie with sea salt ice cream, an omelette egg, a raspberry Napoleon cake, a seafood sandwich, and a pot of hot chocolate. The omelette egg was wrapped with cheese, various vegetables, and ham. It was very refreshing to eat together with the salad that was served together. The combination of ice and fire of the apple pie and ice cream brought a strong stimulation when it entered the mouth, which was very much in line with Yunyan's preferences. I'm alive again. After sweeping almost all the things on the table, Yunyang stretched slightly, revealing her perfect body under the romantic and roguish sunshine of Paris. Seeing this scene, Raito felt energized and quickly asked, "Are we going to the Eiffel Tower now?" Because Yunyang previously said that she wanted to kiss on the Eiffel Tower, Raito was especially looking forward to this trip to the Eiffel Tower. When he thought about being intimate with senior sister Yunyang on a tower that was hundreds of meters high and overlooking the whole of Paris, his young and rogue little heart couldn't take it anymore. Unexpectedly, Yunyang shook her head and smiled. "It's better to go at night. I want to go to another place during the day." "Another place? Where? Louvre? Notre Dame de Paris?" No, those places are not interesting, and I was tired of going there when I was 5. This damned rich lady. After hearing Yunyan's Versailles words, Raito smiled bitterly. "Then aren't you used to coming to Paris? Where else do you want to go?" "Well, I won't be tired of going to that place no matter how many times I go, and that place is also the starting point of my dream." When she said the word starting point of my dream, Yunyan's face couldn't help but show a trace of longing. Dream? If Raito remembered correctly, Yunyan's dream should be to be a novelist, right? The starting point of a novelist's dream, what kind of place would that be? This special information, even in the original Red Album 2, No Survivors was not announced. The players knew that Yunyang wanted to be a novelist, but they didn't know when and how she started to have this idea. After all, Yunyang was the young lady of a high-tech company, and she had a strong personal charm. How could this dream be related to novels? With the thought of wanting to know more about Yunyang, Raito followed Yunyang to the huge building on the west bank of the Seine River. French National Library. Chapter 295. The Bibliothèque Nationale de France was the largest library in France and one of the few large libraries in the world. This world-famous library was built on an industrial wasteland on the bank of the Seine River in Paris, forming the gorgeous scenery on the right bank of the Seine River. From the outside, the huge library was like 4 huge books that were opened, proudly standing under the clear sky, as if all the cultural crystallization of the world was stored in these 4 books. For most visitors or readers, their reading activities at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France began by reading these 4 huge books before entering the library. Of course, for Yunyang and Raito who came here after breakfast, this situation was no exception. Oh, what a big book! Are they not afraid of an earthquake collapsing it? After looking at the appearance of the library from the outside, Long Do thought of some very inauspicious things. Then, he followed Yunyang and walked into the library with great familiarity. The Bibliothèque Nationale de France covered a large area, and there were many books stored inside. At first glance, it felt like it was surrounded by a sea of books. After entering the library, Yunyang pulled Raito to a corner without hesitation. After walking for a while, they stopped in front of a bookshelf. At this time, Yunyang looked at the familiar bookshelf and books in front of her, and said to Raito without looking back, "Didn't I just say that this is the starting point of my dream?" Speaking of which, that was 5 years ago. The first time Yunyang had the idea of becoming a novelist, or rather an author, was when she came to the Bibliothèque Nationale de France with her mother when she was 12 years old, exactly 5 years ago. At that time, Yunyang was a girl who had no interest in literature. Compared to those thick books that didn't look fashionable at all, she preferred beautiful clothes or some rare toys. That's right, the Yunyang at that time did have such a side. She was also naughty, exaggerated, arrogant, proud, and willful. Because there was one thing that Yunyang was very clear about since she was a child, and that was that she was a person chosen by the heavens who could have everything without any effort. Indeed, Yunyang in Tsukujiri was a person chosen by the heavens. Among the billions of people in the world today, There were only a few people who could be compared to the top Miss of Versailles. If there was a word to describe Yunyan's background, then only the word cheat was the most appropriate word. As the Miss of the Tsukujiri group, Yunyang from the day she was born, she had endless wealth. In addition to this wealth, she also had a unique top beauty, a top figure, and extraordinary personal charm. This was especially true for her extraordinary charisma, which had been displayed since she was young. Ever since she was young, no matter what Yunyang did, she would always receive unreserved praise from others. Singing, dancing, tea ceremony, flower ceremony, recitation, drama. When a person has LV5 charm, her every move would naturally be able to shake people's hearts. Even if Yunyang's artistic talent was only at an average level, she would still be able to win the cheers of the audience. No matter what she did, there would be praise, and it would be praise from the bottom of her heart, not the kind that was superficial. From a certain point of view, level 5 charm was like a type of magic that could make people automatically submit to her, a type of magic that didn't require any effort to be praised. But as she grew older, this kind of special treatment finally made Yunyang feel a bit bored one day. Is there something wrong with my life? Is it really okay to continue like this? That year, when she was 12 years old, she couldn't help but think about it one night. No matter what Yunyang did, she could receive praise from others. No matter what she did, she could easily succeed. Was this kind of success that relied on God's gift of charm really her success? Yunyang thought about it for a long time, but she couldn't come up with an answer. Until one day during the holidays, she accompanied her mother to this French National Library. There, she saw her own path. Since the girl was 12 years old, it was the first time she saw such a big library, with so many different kinds of books. In the library, where the walls were carved with exquisite patterns, the rows of bookshelves were as long as the horizon, as if they were going to reach the clouds. Inside the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, there were more than 10 million books. The seemingly vast sea of books brought great shock to the 12-year-old Yunyang. The first thing that entered Yunyang's eyes were the millions of authors' names. On the rows of bookshelves, there were detailed records of countless authors' names. Europeans, Asians, Africans, Americans, contemporary people, modern people, ancient people, men, women, old people, children. In front of the sea of names in the books, many things didn't seem important. What kind of people were the authors of these books in the time period that they lived in? They were good people, bad people, scholars, ordinary people, poor, rich, in the flames of war, or ordinary people. This was the so-called appearance of life. But it didn't matter, no matter what they were like when they were alive. In the end, this group of people used the words that were passed down and obtained eternal life. A person's death was like an extinguished lamp, but as long as their words were passed down, their name, their spirit, and their ideals were passed down, it was equivalent to living in another form in history. When the 12-year-old Yunyang looked at the rows of names on the bookshelves, she suddenly understood this principle. She couldn't help but shed tears of excitement. Yes, this is the path that I want to walk. No matter how good my family background is, no matter how beautiful my appearance is, no matter how amazing my charm is. All of these factors, both internal and external, will gradually disappear with the passage of time and the transformation of time and space. But no matter how much time passes, the words still have the power of a rock. Even if 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years have passed, it will still leave behind its own traces. I've decided, I want to be an author. I don't want to rely on Tianxi's family background, looks, and charm to live an ignoble life. I want to rely on my own abilities. I want to rely on the pen in my hand to let these words, clouds, and geese in the moon, gain eternal life in the world of word. At that time, the 12-year-old Yunyang stood in front of this row of bookshelves and made a vow of her life. 5 years later, the 17-year-old Yunyang was still standing in the same place, looking at the same batch of books in front of her. It was as if her 17-year-old and 12-year-old self overlapped. But different from the 12-year-old Yunyang, the current her had someone by her side who would unwaveringly support her no matter what. It sounds stupid. After describing her past, Yunyang turned to Raito and said with a smile, The young mistress who has everything from birth wants to take the most difficult path. How could that be? Long Do shook his head and said seriously, it would be better to say, I have a feeling of respect for you now. This was not out of politeness, but Raito's praise from the bottom of his heart. Moreover, the reason for this praise had nothing to do with Yunyan's extraordinary charm. Instead, it came from her noble and unyielding character. Just as Yunyang had said, she was a woman who was destined to have everything from the day she was born. Her charm, beautiful appearance, and illustrious family background could only be described as invincible. It could allow her to live a carefree and colorful life, and she would be happier than anyone else in the world. Even so, she still took the initiative to choose the most difficult path. No matter how good Yunyan's family background was, no matter how beautiful Yunyan's appearance was, no matter how powerful Yunyan's charm was, it had nothing to do with the words she wrote. On the path of writing, Yunyang gave up all the advantages of her talent and built a bridge to her dream from scratch. Everything she did was to prove to the world that even if she did not rely on her family background, appearance, or charm, Yunyang could still attract people's attention to her name. Raito felt that giving up her heaven-given ability for her dream was very noble. In Long Do's eyes, she had been working hard to realize her dream for the past few years, and her determination was extremely firm. Even at this moment, senior sister Yunyang stood in front of the bookshelf and was surrounded by the vast and boundless books in front of her. There was a unique sense of beauty that Long Do had never seen before. It was a sense of beauty that seemed to be emitting the light of faith. Hey! Hihi, is that so? After being praised by Raito, Yunyang felt a little embarrassed. But she quietly picked up her phone and stuffed it into Raito's arms. She said with a smile, since you're already in the library, why don't you take the opportunity to see if my novel has improved? How far is it from the group of great writers around me? Okay, then I'll read your masterpiece and see when your book can be collected in this library. Raito took Yunyan's phone and focused his attention. He carefully read the lines of words on the phone with the greatest enthusiasm. It was as if he was reading the Bible in his mind, solemn and serious. Unfortunately, in just 5 seconds, Raito regretted it. As he read Yunyan's recent literary masterpiece, fine beads of sweat flowed down from his forehead. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and his body faintly trembled. How should he describe Yunyan's book? After thinking for a moment, Raito handed the phone back to Yunyang and said with a wry smile, not bad, as a light novel that's relaxing and funny, there should be bookstores that are willing to publish it. A light novel that's funny? However, Yunyang frowned when she heard that. But my book's main theme is obviously a touching sadomasochistic plot. It's not relaxing at all, right? For a moment, the two of them looked at each other in the corner of the library, and the atmosphere was awkward. Chapter 296. However, although something awkward happened at the end of this supposedly heartwarming trip to the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, Raito and Yunyang still had a lot of fun during the day. After the two left the library, they went to the Seine River to enjoy the scenery of Paris on a boat. In the afternoon, they went to the famous shopping street to buy a lot of clothes and gifts. Finally, when the sun was about to set, they had a sumptuous dinner at the Le Petit Troquet beside the Eiffel Tower. After dinner, the sky gradually became dark. Logically speaking, it was almost time to go to the Eiffel Tower. According to Yunyan's knowledge, the Eiffel Tower was open from 9:30 in the morning to 10:30 in the evening. If they went too late, they couldn't go up the tower and could only sightsee below. That would be too boring. However, Raito rejected the proposal to go directly to the Eiffel Tower after dinner. Instead, he mysteriously said to Yunyang, "Don't worry, it's boring to go too early. Let's go later." "Should I go there later? How late would it be? Don't tell me we'll wait until the elevator and stairs are closed before we go. Then how do we go up the tower?" At this time, Yunyang also couldn't guess Raito's thoughts. However, out of trust for her boyfriend, she continued to follow Raito on the streets of Paris. Just like this, the two watched a movie, went shopping, and sat in a dessert shop. Not long after, it was already close to 11 o'clock at night. The entrance of the Eiffel Tower is really closed. Now we can't go up. When Yunyang and Raito finally arrived at the bottom of the Eiffel Tower, the former looked at the closed elevator and stares at the bottom of the tower. She couldn't help but show a helpless expression. The Eiffel Tower was a 300-meter tall steel tower. It was divided into 3 floors. The elevators located at the 4 pillars could reach the first, second, and third floors. If one took the stairs, they could only reach the first and second floors. But now, it was already past 10:30. Not to mention the elevator, even the stairs were gone. Yunyang could only stand on the ground and stare blankly at the huge shadow that was particularly conspicuous in the night sky. But at this moment, Raito smiled and said, "Don't be in such a hurry. At this time, the tourists and staff have basically all left. If we go up now, won't we be able to spend some quality time together? You have to be able to go up first." Yunyang pouted when she heard that. She pointed to the staircase and said, "Don't tell me you're planning to pry it open. I'll call the police." "Pry? I never said I was going to take the stairs or the elevator. Wasn't the outside of the Iron Tower empty? Why don't we just climb up?" "Climb? Climb up from the outside?" The moment she heard this sentence, Yunyang was petrified. In fact, because the Eiffel Tower was a special steel structure, it was not sealed with concrete. With the naked eye, one could see that there were climbing points everywhere inside and outside the tower. It was not like no one had ever climbed the tower from the outside. According to the Paris police, every year, a group of extreme climbing enthusiasts from all over the world would gather here and try to secretly climb the 324-meter tall antenna tower with their bare hands. Some of these climbing enthusiasts succeeded, some failed. Some were arrested by the police, and some fell to their deaths. They were simply using their own lives to demonstrate the true meaning of courting death. However, unlike them, Long Do wasn't climbing from the outside alone this time. Instead, he had to bring along senior sister Yunyang. Is it really okay? Yunyang watched as Long Do reached a corner of the Iron Tower and prepared to climb up. She felt goosebumps all over her body as Long Do wrapped his arm around her slender waist and her entire body was practically hanging on his body. Yunyang watched as Long Do approached the corner of the Iron Tower and prepared to climb up. She felt her hair stand on end. 324 meters, this was a 324-meter tall building, and he was climbing without any protection. The most ridiculous part was that he had to bring someone up with him and climb with one hand. This was definitely the craziest tower climbing plan in history. But Raito heard this and gently kissed Yunyang's forehead, and smiled, "Don't worry, this height and shape is no different from flat ground to me. You just have to enjoy the scenery." But, before senior sister Yunyang could finish her sentence, Long Do suddenly leaped forward and stepped on a steel bar on the outer layer of the tower. Then, he lightly jumped 5 to 6 meters into the air. Then he reached out the hand that was not holding Yunyang and hooked onto the steel bar on the outside. His body flipped up again, and the two were already standing on a steel bar more than 10 meters high. Then, the tower parkour that senior sister Yunyang had never imagined even in her wildest dreams began. Why did they use the word parkour instead of climbing to describe Ryu Kung Fu's movements? That was because he wasn't climbing at all. He was just running up the tower's outer perimeter. The huge Eiffel Tower was made up of crisscrossing steel bars that were connected to each other. With such a structure, it was destined that there would be places for people to rest their feet at certain intervals. Thus, Raito's body was seen running up the slanted tower in the dark night. With a person in his arms, he jumped up as if he was walking on flat ground. Every jump was able to cross a height of several meters. So climbing up the Eiffel Tower from the outside is actually such a simple thing? Before Yunyang could regain her senses, she felt as if she was riding on the clouds as she continued to ascend. It did not take long for her to arrive at the highest point of the antenna tower. Standing at the top of the 324-meter tall tower, looking down from this angle, she could completely overlook half of the night view of Paris. Of course, this was under the premise that she was not afraid of heights. Otherwise, just the flat steel bar structure without any protection around it was enough to scare a timid person to the point of fainting on the spot. Fortunately, Yun Yang was a woman who had nothing to do with the word timid. Wow. It's so beautiful. Thus, after being carried to the top of the tower by Raito, she immediately looked at the night view of more than 300 meters high. The night in Paris was still flashing with neon lights and feasting. There were cars and people everywhere below, and a few planes flew over from time to time. But at the top of the Eiffel Tower, at the top of the 324-meter-tall antenna tower, was a private space that belonged only to Yunyang and Raito. After admiring the beautiful scenery for a while, Yunyang could not help but turn her head to look at Raito. At the same time, she reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck. She smiled and said, "That's great. It's the best gift for leaving home." "Oh, is it?" Raito also smiled and said, "If that's the case, then what about it? What kind of gift are you going to give me in return?" "Well, then I'll give myself back to you as a gift. You have to accept it gently." Suddenly, Yunyang also slowly closed her gentle eyes, took the initiative to move forward, and pressed her cherry lips on Raito's mouth. In the early winter, the wind at 300 meters high was still somewhat cold, but the atmosphere at the top of the tower was particularly hot, as if even the frost was about to be melted by the passion of the two. After kissing for a long time, the blushing Yunyang took a deep breath and said emotionally, "Let's go down, it's getting late, we should find a place to rest." When the word rest was said, Yunyang felt her heart beat faster, and Raito felt the same. In the kiss and hug just now, the temperature of the two was constantly rising. Obviously, this kind of primary contact could not satisfy Yunyang now. She needed deeper and more intimate contact. Raito naturally understood Yunyang's meaning, so he also nodded. He hugged Yunyang's back with one hand and her slender legs with the other, and jumped down the tower without hesitation. Shua. The next moment, a pair of hooligan gliders that hadn't been used for a long time spread out from Longdo's back. The two of them glided downwards under the night wind, glided, until they landed on a street in an unknown corner of Paris. After ignoring the surrounding passers-by who were obviously frightened, Raito and Yunyang looked at each other and smiled. They began to look for a special building on both sides of the street, a hotel. Hotel, it was indeed a hotel. After all, it was almost midnight now, and it was time to find a place to rest. This was a very normal thing. As for whether they would do anything before resting, cough cough, that was hard to say. Perhaps the two of them would chat for a while, play poker, or something like that. After searching for a while, they finally found a decent hotel in the corner of the street. But before entering the hotel, Yunyang pointed at the shop next to her and said embarrassedly, "Why don't we buy something first?" "Buy something? What do you want to buy?" "It's that, round thing." As Yunyang said, she gestured with her hand, but it could probably be understood what she wanted to buy. Unlike Downia, who had no experience in this area and had no common sense, Yunyang knew what basic protective measures should be taken before that. Otherwise, if they accidentally hit the target the first time, they wouldn't be able to enjoy it for a long time. Thus, the two of them sneaked towards the store like thieves, preparing to buy some small props that young people would love to see. But just as Raito opened the door of the shop first, a beautiful woman with delicate facial features, tall and slender figure, who gave off a cold feeling, just happened to turn her head and look over there. Her. Wait. It's her. The moment he saw the beautiful woman, Raito's eyes suddenly widened. At the same time, Raito's old acquaintance who appeared here for some reason, the Metropolitan Police Department, Search Section 1 Chief, Tokushima Rinka also showed a surprised expression. Chapter 297. Ryu-do couldn't be more familiar with Tokushima Rahana, the chief of the Metropolitan Police Department Search Department, who was also known as the Ghost of Search. Even in the Kokyo incident a few months ago, he was almost robbed of some important things by Lin Hua. The relationship between the two was also a mess, and he didn't know how to describe it. "Ryu. Raito-kun? Why are you here?" Raito was very surprised when he saw Lin Hua, and Lin Hua also slightly widened her cold and slender eyes, and asked in a slightly surprised tone. Because she was not at work at this time, but on vacation, Lin Hua did not wear her usual police uniform or professional attire, but changed into a romantic dress that was very suitable for the city of Paris. The long dress that reached her ankles wrapped around her curvaceous figure. At the same time, it exposed her perfectly round shoulders, charming collarbone, and slender arms. Coupled with the pair of wine-colored high heels on her feet, she appeared even more seductive. What a beautiful and mature woman! Such a figure, dress, and her natural cold expression simply made people who were interested in her feel that they couldn't stop. They couldn't wait to kneel under her dress and be stepped on by the wine-colored high heels. But when he heard Lin Hua's question, Raito replied awkwardly, I'm actually, Sister Lin Hua. It's actually you, long time no see. Why are you here? But just when Raito was about to find a perfunctory reason, Yunyang, who was just picking out some strange boxes of small umbrellas at the counter, ran over in surprise, and then shouted something that made Raito even more surprised. Sister Lin Hua? You know Chief Teishima? The Teishima family and our Tsukujiri family are distant relatives. Sister Lin Hua is my cousin, of course we know each other. At this time, Yunyang walked over and put her hand on Lin Hua's shoulder, and said to Raito with a smile. The Tokushima clan and the Tsukumi clan. So that's how it was. They had this kind of relationship. In the game Red Album 2, No Survivors, there wasn't much information about Hana Tokushima's family. After all, she was just a villain, and not a particularly important one. Therefore, there wasn't any detailed personal information. But judging from the current situation, Lin Hua's family background didn't seem to be simple. She was actually a distant relative of the Tsukujiri family, and she was actually a cousin of Yunyang. This information was not in the game. After all, Yunyang's personal storyline was the only one of the three main storylines that did not involve too much fighting with the Heavenly Eye group. Therefore, Tokushima Rahana's character had never appeared at all. Naturally, there was no scene of her and Yunyang together. This was great. Their relationship was getting more and more messy. Seeing Lin Hua and Yunyang leaning together and talking intimately, Raito couldn't help but show a bitter smile. He and Lin Hua were almost like a rich woman and a duck. Lin Hua coveted his man, and he coveted Lin Hua's information and help. Although the two were not lovers, they each had their own needs, and they had some intimate contact. But now, he found out that Lin Hua was actually his girlfriend's cousin. What was this? I'm a kept duck of my girlfriend's cousin? This was too messy. Just as Raito was having a headache about the wonderful triangle relationship between himself, Yunyang, and Lin Hua on the other side smiled and said to Yunyang, I heard that you and Raito-kun are dating before. This time, you're preparing to come out and enjoy the two of you world, right? No, it's just a normal trip. Although Yunyang was always very bold when facing Raito, she showed a rare sisterly side in front of Sister Lin Hua. She quickly raised her hand and waved to show that she didn't mean that. Of course, when Yunyang waved her hand, she forgot that she was still holding a mysterious small box in her hand. The small box contained some small umbrellas that would be used at special times. When Lin Hua's gaze looked at the small box in Yunyang's hand, Yunyang's face suddenly flushed red. She didn't know whether to put the thing in her hand back or hide it. It was extremely awkward. How should she describe this situation? She brought her boyfriend to get a room, and when she was buying an umbrella, she happened to meet an elder, and her purpose was seen through by the elder. It was so awkward that she wanted to die. Okay. When she saw Yunyang's awkward look, Lin Hua said lightly, love between a man and a woman is human nature, and it's also a step that everyone has to go through. There's nothing to be shy about. Yes. When Yunyang heard this, she took a deep breath, and her face slowly returned to normal. When the two sisters were talking, Raito looked at them curiously. After all, this kind of Yunyang and Lin Hua was something that Raito had never seen before. It was a very novel side. Lin Hua, who usually met with Long Do, was the head of the search department. She was a spy from the Heavenly Eye group. She was a cold and perverted woman who was different from the outside. She was Long Do's partner. Yunyang, who usually met with Raito, was a student of Dori First High School. She was the young miss of the Tsukimori group. She was a bold woman who did what she said, and she was Raito's girlfriend. But now, they were not the ones that Raito knew. They called each other sisters, and they had put themselves in the role of elder sister and younger sister. As the elder sister, Lin Hua had a trace of gentleness in her usual coldness, and she had the steadiness and magnanimity that an elder sister should have. As the younger sister, Yunyang had a trace of gentleness in her usual gentleness, and she had the delicateness and cuteness that a younger sister should have. Oh! When the two sisters stood together, they were really as beautiful as flowers. At this time, Raito, who looked at the sisters, could not help but nod. After all, it was a feast for the eyes to see such a beautiful scene of sisters gathered together in the city of romance. According to Lin Hua, she was on vacation recently, so she came to Paris alone to relax and shop. This was one of Lin Hua's favorite pastimes. Looking at the big shopping bag at her feet, Longdo also knew that what Lin Hua said was true. The meeting between the three of them was indeed a coincidence, and it was not planned in advance by the other side. But Raito could not be blamed for thinking too much. After all, Lin Hua's identity was more or less sensitive. In addition to being the section chief of the Metropolitan Police Department, she was also the head of the Heavenly Eye Group. She was a super spy sent by Eheim to the government. She was also Raito's enemy. However, Yunyang naturally did not know about such things. So she clapped her hands happily and smiled. "Sister Lin Hua, where are you going? How about bringing me along? I just bought some wine, and I plan to go back to the hotel and drink to my heart's content." "Can you drink?" Yes, I can drink, right? Long." "Ah." At this time, Yunyang suddenly remembered that she did not come alone. Behind her, there was a boyfriend who was eagerly waiting to get a room. She wanted to have a good gathering with her cousin whom she had not seen for a long time. But what about Raito? She couldn't bring Raito to Lin Hua's room, right? That would feel too strange. After all, Raito was a man, and Lin Hua was a woman. She must be more or less okay. But before Yunyang could think of this, Lin Hua glanced at Raito and said faintly, "Raito-kun, come with us. Let's drink. The more people, the merrier." "Hey! Sister Lin Hua, shouldn't you and Raito be that?" Speaking of this, Yunyang realized that Lin Hua was a police officer, and Raito was an extreme do. The two should have a natural relationship, but Lin Hua asked Raito to go to her room to drink. "I have some friendship with Raito-kun. He definitely won't refuse, right?" As Lin Hua spoke, she gave Raito a slight wink. "Hurry up and agree, or I'll tell Yunyang about what we did in the flower bed, okay? Damn it, this stinky woman." After understanding Lin Hua's meaning, Raito had to smile and said, "Yes, we are still friends. Drinking together is not a problem." "Really? That's great." When she noticed that there was no conflict between her boyfriend and her cousin, Yunyang also jumped up happily. She quickly pulled Lin Hua to the freezer next to her to pick up wine and snacks. "Here, take it." Lin Hua handed the paper bag at her feet to Raito and whispered in his ear, "Don't drop the things inside, otherwise, I will use yours as a replacement." "Using me as a replacement? No way, right? Could it be?" The moment he heard this sentence, Raito only felt a tremor, and he seemed to understand what was in the heavy paper bag in his hand. "Are you crazy? Ordinary women come to Paris to shop for clothes and shoes. You came to Paris to shop for this thing? And you want me to help you carry it?" Carrying the heavy paper bag with countless strange things in it, Raito only felt that it was not right to take it or throw it away. His expression became extremely strange. Lin Hua, on the other hand, was picking out the wine, snacks, poker, dice and other entertainment equipment for the evening with Yunyang. At the same time, she inadvertently looked at Raito, and the corner of her mouth raised slightly. Obviously, this woman did it on purpose, absolutely on purpose. Damn it. Is she trying to ruin my romantic trip to Paris with Yunyang? Beast. But no matter what, ever since Longdo and Yunyang met Lin Hua here, they were supposed to be very romantic tonight, but it was estimated that half of it had already been ruined. Not long after, when Raito carried 2 big bags and followed behind the sisters, and walked toward the hotel not far away with a face full of displeasure, he felt a chill on his back, as if he had an ominous premonition. Originally, if Lin Hua did not appear, Raito should be happily rolling in the sheets with Yunyang now. In the end, there was nothing left, and he had to accompany this crazy woman to drink. What a joke. Beep. However, just as the three of them arrived outside Lin Hua's room, the owner opened the door with the room card, and the three of them walked into the dim room. Raito actually did not realize what kind of terrifying thing he was going to face in a while. Chapter 298. Clang. As the door was closed from the inside, the huge city of Paris outside seemed to be isolated from the outside, and inside was a strange small world of its own, a small world that only belonged to the three of them. The hotel suite that Lin Hua lived in was the most luxurious kind. The room was very large, and the decoration was very elegant. The floor was covered with a clean and soft carpet, and the bed that was enough for 2 or 3 people to roll around on it made people want to lie down and not get up. Sit anywhere, don't be shy. After entering the room, Lin Hua bent down easily, reached out and took off the pair of wine-colored high heels on her feet, revealing the beautiful feet wrapped in black lace stockings. Perhaps it was because she had practiced martial arts, although Lin Hua's hands and feet were slender, they gave people a feeling that they were quite smooth and powerful. It was different from Rui Hui, Yunyang, and Downia. This woman. Something is wrong. Looking at Lin Hua twisting her waist and stepping on the carpet with her stockinged feet, Raito could not help but sigh. He also took off his shoes at the door with Yunyang and walked in together. It was obvious that Lin Hua had been living here for a few days. There were some daily necessities scattered around the room, and the unique cold fragrance of her body floated everywhere. Lin Hua's body fragrance was also different from that of other women. It was the kind that smelled cool and refreshing, like the fragrance of mint. However, if one sniffed carefully, it was not difficult to smell a strange fishy smell in the room. How should one describe this fishy smell? Forget it, there was no need to describe it. It was better not to delve into it. Judging from the messy bag in Raito's hands, it was not difficult for him to imagine what Lin Hua had done in the room for the past few days. But obviously, Yunyang was completely unaware of her cousin's special hobby. After entering the room, she threw herself on Lin Hua's bed, crossed her feet in white stockings, and said with a smile, "I haven't slept in Sister Lin Hua's bed for a long time. Hey, I really miss it." "Really? You seemed to come to my house often when you were young and always slept with me." Ian, I don't know why, but Sister Lin Hua's bed always has a strange smell. It smells quite good, and I especially like this smell." Sniff. Yunyang immediately pounced on his bed and sniffed curiously. "God, please don't let Yunyang know what that smell is." Looking at Yunyang's innocent and cute actions, Raito couldn't help but silently pray in his heart. However, as Lin Hua sat down on the bed and placed her long legs on the bed, Raito couldn't take his eyes off her. Because of shopping in Paris today, Yunyang was now wearing a large warm pink knitted dress and milky white lycra cotton stockings. She looked more cute than the usual elegant and dignified senior sister. Compared to Yunyang, Lin Hua was dressed in a more mature and ladylike manner. Her slim-fit velvet dress accentuated her graceful figure, and the black lace stockings that peeked out from the side of the dress emphasized the charm of her slender legs. 2 sisters, 1 bed, 1 black stockings, 1 mature, 1 cute. The different styles brought about the same powerful temptation to men. Coupled with the extremely suggestive background of the big bed, Raito looked at the 2 pairs of beautiful legs in front of him and didn't know what to do. Seeing Raito standing there in a daze, Lin Hua raised her eyebrows slightly and said lightly, "Don't just stand there, do what you should do." "Huh?" Raito swallowed a mouthful of saliva when he heard the words, and asked in a trembling voice, "That, I should, go and bring all the drinks and snacks to the bed. I have to have a few drinks with my lovely sister." Chirp. As Lin Hua said, she reached out and hugged Yunyang's shoulder and pulled her into her arms. She even kissed the tender and smooth face without hesitation, leaving a faint lipstick mark. Generally speaking, Yunyang and Lin Hua were both women, and they were cousins, so it was normal for them to do some intimate actions. But after kissing Yunyang's little face, Lin Hua deliberately looked at Raito with a provocative look, and even stuck out her tongue to lick her lips. It was like a Tauren looking at the victim after getting what she wanted. This. Why do I feel like something is wrong? Is she playing with me? No, is she flirting with me? Although Yunyang did not think much about such a move, Raito vaguely noticed Lin Hua's meaning, because this woman was obviously flirting with him. That's right, although Lin Hua was kissing Yunyang at this time, the person she was actually flirting with was Raito. Look, your lovely girlfriend is in my arms, and I'm kissing her face. Are you happy? It doesn't matter if you're happy or not, I'm happy anyway. Puff puff puff. Indirect flirting. This was indirect flirting. Using Yunyang's body to flirt with Raito's soul. He could not help but say to Lin Hua, "You really know how to play." The most exaggerated thing was that when Raito turned around to take out the drinks and food from the bag on the table, Lin Hua on the bed continued to increase the intensity of her flirting. "You were so small before, and now you've grown so tall, time really flies. Is it that? Sister Lin Hua? Your hand. I'm just checking your body's condition, I've studied medicine, do you remember? This is a little millimeter, I'm not used to it. Millimeter, for the time being, there seems to be no problem with your upper body, next is to check other places." Slurp. When Lin Hua hugged Yunyang in her arms, and righteously checked her body, she looked at Raito from time to time, and her expression became even more arrogant. "The drinks are here. Both of you, please enjoy." Seeing his girlfriend being touched by this crazy woman, Raito hurriedly threw the food and drinks on the bed, which happened to pile up in the middle of Yunyang and Lin Hua, separating them. Phew. Phew, phew. At this time, Yunyang also breathed a sigh of relief, and her cheeks were slightly flushed. How to put it, Yunyang did not hate her cousin's playful sexual contact, but after all, Raito was still in the room, and this situation was somewhat strange. But Lin Hua smiled slightly, picked up a bottle of beer, opened it, and handed it to Yunyang, and said with a smile, "To celebrate our fate of meeting in a foreign country, cheers." Before Yunyang raised the cup, Lin Hua had already raised her slender neck, and poured 500 milliliters of beer down her throat. Obviously, Lin Hua was a drunkard, and her alcohol tolerance was quite good. Yunyang took the can of beer, looked at her empty can, and steeled her heart, and poured the liquid inside into her stomach. Millimeter. This beer is. But when Raito also started to drink the beer, he frowned slightly, because the alcohol content of this thing was obviously higher than the beer he usually drank. Generally, the alcohol content of ordinary beer was between 3 to 5 degrees, but the beer that Lin Hua chose at this time was at least 8 degrees, and belonged to the category of strong beer. Whoosh. So when Yunyang suddenly drank a bottle of beer, she felt a little dizzy, and she obviously felt the power of this thing. Yunyang, who knew that she would definitely get drunk after drinking a few bottles of this kind of beer, frowned and quickly said, "Sister Lin Hua, this beer. Speaking of which, it's boring for us to just drink, why don't we play Fight the Landlord? The loser has to unconditionally obey the winner's request, how about it?" Before the two people sitting on the bed could reply, Lin Hua took out the poker cards and placed them between the three of them, and shuffled the cards with a skillful hand. Is there a mistake? This guy really likes to make his own decisions. But forget it, it's just Fight the Landlord, everyone has a chance to win. Because this world of Red Album 2, No One Lives was produced by a domestic company, there were naturally some games that did not belong to this country, but this was not a big deal. Furthermore, Long Do was not boasting. Just by looking at his golden hair that stood up like a crab's, one could tell that he was a rare card expert. Come on, Toshima Lin Hua, even if my life is like a candle in the wind, I will use all means to win. Duel. Swish. Just at the moment when Raito was ready for battle, Lin Hua also began to deal cards at a speed that made people unable to see his wrist movements. Wow. When seeing Lin Hua's dealing speed, Yunyang couldn't help but widen her eyes because she never thought that a human's dealing speed could be faster than a machine. Almost in just 2 or 3 seconds, the cards in front of the three people had been dealt, and the landlord of the first round also fell into the hands of Lin Hua. Stealing the landlord in the first round? It doesn't matter, let me see the cards in my hand first, then I will use my LV4 wisdom to completely, landlord face card, king bomb, 2 bomb, a bomb, K bomb, Q bomb, pair of 3. Spring dragon, game over, I won the first round. Without waiting for Long Do to see what kind of cards he was holding, Lin Hua had already thrown out the cards in his hand like a string of cannons. Is this a fucking landlord? Is it really the same game as us? When he dealt the cards, he stole the landlord. Lin Hua got a set of cards that only a cheater could get, and instantly ended the first round of battle. Raito realized that he was fooled. This woman had already started to tamper with the cards when she shuffled at lightning speed, piling all the good cards on his side. If all of them were bombs, then what was there to play? Toshima. Lin Hua, you. Speaking of which, I won the first round, right? Then I'll make a request. Suddenly, Lin Hua grinned slightly, and then in front of Yunyang, she put her long legs wrapped in black lace stockings in front of Raito. After shopping for a day today, my legs are a little sore. Please, give me a good massage. In the luxury suite of this hotel, Lin Hua showed a strange smile on her bed, and looked at Raito with slightly cloudy eyes. Chapter 299. This. What should I do? Looking at the jade-like foot wrapped in black stockings, Raito felt his mind go blank for a while. Although he knew that Lin Hua was a troublemaker, he didn't expect her to do it to this extent. As everyone knew, the foot was also one of the private parts of a woman. Although it was more open now, it was not a place that could be touched by men casually. Especially at this time, Lin Hua was still wearing seductive black stockings. Her jade-like foot exuded a slightly cold body fragrance, attracting all of Raito's attention like a black hole. In fact, Raito didn't mind massaging Lin Hua's legs very much. After all, his relationship with Lin Hua was a bit complicated. If he could build a good relationship with her by doing this, it wouldn't be too much of a loss. Of course, Raito definitely thought so. He definitely didn't mind massaging Lin Hua for the sake of benefits. He definitely didn't covet the feel of her jade-like foot, calf, and thigh wrapped in stockings. But the problem was that the two of them were not alone now. Yunyang was sitting next to them. So when Lin Hua stretched out her leg, Yunyang, who was sitting next to her, couldn't help but open her mouth slightly, showing a surprised expression. After all, she didn't think that her cousin, who looked very cold, would make such a request. This was too strange, right? As for you, Yunyang, just drink another bottle, hurry up. But at this moment, Lin Hua turned her gaze to Yunyang next to her, picked up another bottle of beer, opened it, and handed it over. In the last landlord game, Lin Hua won as the landlord, so she could make a request to the two farmers who lost. Among them, the request for Raito was a massage, and the request for Yunyang was to drink. What should I do? At this time, Raito and Yunyang looked at the stockings and beer in front of them and looked up at each other almost at the same time. That, Yunyang? Is this really okay? It seemed that there was no other way. Sister Lin Hua was the kind of person who would not change her mind once she had made up her mind. After some eye contact, Yunyang nodded helplessly. She accepted her fate and poured the second can of beer into her mouth. Pause. Oh, he really drank it. Looking at Yunyang drinking beer with great difficulty, Raito also turned his head and looked at the pair of jade legs in front of him. He then looked at Lin Hua's smug expression, and he suddenly became angry. It's fine if you force my girlfriend to drink, but you also want me to massage your feet in front of her? Fine. I'll do it, but don't regret it. Thinking of this, Raito smirked and reached out to grab the right foot that was reaching towards him. There was a silky and soft feeling in his hand. This was a feeling that could only be felt when touching the highest grade of stockings. If he thought that this stocking foot belonged to the Metropolitan Police Department, Search Section 1 Section Chief, and it belonged to this beautiful woman who looked quite cold on the surface, but was actually extremely passionate on the inside, then this action was even more tempting. But even so, Raito did not immerse himself in this strange temptation. From the beginning, the reason why Lin Hua made this request must be to see Raito's embarrassed and shy face. After all, now in front of Yunyang, in front of his girlfriend, it was indeed a bit awkward for Raito to massage the feet of other women. Just like this, show your true side in front of Yunyang, Raito Kiri, let Yunyang see what a man you are. When Raito held her jade feet, Lin Hua, who looked at his expression, couldn't help but feel a little proud. Why did Lin Hua do these strange things tonight? The reason was actually very simple. It was because of jealousy. In fact, when she learned that Raito was dating Yunyang, she was already very jealous. From Lin Hua's point of view, Raito was her favorite toy, and Yunyang was her favorite sister. Therefore, the situation now became that her favorite sister wanted to take away her favorite toy, or her favorite toy wanted to take away her favorite sister. Lin Hua didn't know whether to resent Yunyang or Raito. On one hand, she was jealous of Yunyang, who could be with Raito openly. On the other hand, she was jealous of Raito, who actually tricked her cute sister. Torren, this was probably the so-called Torren, and it was an extremely complicated triangular Torren. With such a vengeful mentality, Lin Hua did what she did tonight. She wanted to let Yunyang see that Raito was a stinky man who would blush in front of her feet, and then find a way to promote the two guys to break up. In this way, Lin Hua wouldn't lose her toy and her sister. However, it was obvious that Lin Hua's temporary plan would not succeed. Because at the same time that he held her stocking foot, Raito raised the thumb of his other hand slightly and suddenly pressed on a certain acupuncture point on the beautiful curve of the foot. Hair! When Raito's finger pressed on the acupuncture point on the sole of her foot, and a strange force quickly traveled up the finger, Lin Hua suddenly widened her eyes. At the same time, her whole body quickly rose back. Her slender waist was almost bent into the shape of a bow because of the excessive force. Although it perfectly reflected the waist curve of a mature woman, this was not what Lin Hua wanted to do. So exciting. What's going on? I feel like my whole body is being electrocuted. And that strange force that seems to be wandering around my body just now. Is it hidden force? After coming to her senses, Lin Hua quickly lowered her head to look at Raito. And when she saw the handsome face with an obvious smile on his face, Lin Hua realized that she seemed to have miscalculated. As a martial arts master, Lin Hua had already completed the release of qi under the guidance of a famous teacher, and even relied on her outstanding talent to cultivate to the realm of hidden force at a young age. Therefore, she could feel how exquisite Raito's finger just now was, and how unbearable the hidden force was. That wonderful energy quickly rose from the soles of Lin Hua's feet. Like an invisible snake, it coiled around Lin Hua's body from the bottom to the top. Moreover, it moved around all the parts of her body that could not withstand the torment. For Lin Hua, this feeling was like being subjected to a strange electric shock. As the electric current swept through, it almost made her whole body go limp and numb, and this was the result of just one finger. Previously, I heard that he single-handedly killed the devil child Saitu, but now it seems that I still underestimated him. Feeling the strong numbness in her body, and looking at the right foot in Raito's hand, Lin Hua suddenly realized that she seemed to have become a piece of meat on the chopping board, and she was a piece of stupid meat that threw herself on the chopping board, allowing Raito to do whatever he wanted with her. Me. Seeing that this woman seemed to understand the situation, Raito smiled slightly, and his thumb pierced out again, and a stronger wave of hidden force quickly wandered through her body like a poisonous snake. It was different from the hidden force that swept through her like an electric current last time, which made her feel limp and numb. This time, Raito obviously increased his strength, so much so that it made Lin Hua's body feel obvious pain. 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 Limp and numb. Limp and numb. Limp and numb. The obvious pain mixed with the obvious limp and numbness, like a bolt of lightning, went straight to Lin Hua's brain, almost shaking her to the point that her eyes became unfocused, and her whole body went limp. If an ordinary person felt pain, they would not feel happy, but Lin Hua was different. She was born with this strange problem: the more painful it was, the happier she would be. After recovering from this wave of shock, she finally pulled herself together and said, Raito-kun, it's enough, let's stop here. Oh! When he heard this, Raito asked in confusion, "Are you begging me for mercy?" This is not the attitude of begging for mercy. After that, his finger continued to pierce the slippery soles of her feet, and Lin Hua, who saw this scene about to happen, hurriedly begged, "No, don't. Yunyang is still here." As Lin Hua said, she looked at Yunyang, who was drinking beer reluctantly. Perhaps because the alcohol content of the beer was too high, or perhaps because she was already a little dizzy. At this time, Yunyang narrowed her eyes slightly and slowly let the beer flow into her mouth, and she did not pay attention to the movements of the two people next to her. But if she let Raito continue to stimulate her like this, Lin Hua was worried that she would make some indecent sounds and do something indecent in front of her sister, which was not what she wanted to see. In that case, it would become the execution scene of Tokushima Lin Hua, not Raito Kirie's execution scene. However, although Lin Hua said so, would Raito let her go so easily? Of course, that was impossible. At this time, Raito picked up a small pillow from the side and threw it on Lin Hua, and sneered, "If you can't hold on, bite it, otherwise, you will die in front of your sister." "Hey! Wait! Woo 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 woo." Without waiting for Lin Hua to finish speaking, Long Do once again stabbed the soles of her feet. The strong hidden force penetrated directly into every corner of her body, bringing stimulation and intense pain at the same time. Gurgle gurgle gurgle. After 2 or 3 minutes, Yunyang, who was next to her, reluctantly drank a large can of beer, and then opened her slightly blurred eyes and looked to the side. But at this time, Yunyang found that sister Lin Hua, who was supposed to sit on the bed together, had already disappeared without a trace. Looking to the other side, she found that Lin Hua had been thrown on the sofa in the corner of the room, and she seemed to be twitching under the quilt. Looking at Raito, who was preparing to cover her with the quilt, Yunyang asked in confusion, "Raito, how did sister Lin Hua fall asleep? And why is she sleeping on the sofa?" "Well, maybe because she thinks that we should leave the bed to do something more meaningful." "More meaningful? In the next second, Raito, who had long been unable to hold back, pushed Yunyang onto Lin Hua's bed and covered the two with the quilt. In the room late at night, there was a faint smell of alcohol and a strange smell. Chapter 300. No one knew when it started, but the light of dawn gradually lifted the veil of night, spitting out the brilliant morning glow, enveloping the entire Paris in translucent golden threads. What's going on? When Raito, who was lying on the bed in the hotel, woke up, he found that his head hurt a little. It was obviously because someone had poured too much beer down his throat last night. What was even more terrifying was that the moment Raito opened his eyes, other than Yunyan's angelic and cute sleeping face, there was also Lin Hua's cold and seductive face, which was like a succubus from hell. That's right, Raito woke up early in the morning and saw two faces at the same time. Because these two faces were sleeping on his left and right arms, and they were both facing him. That's enough. After feeling the terrifying atmosphere on the bed that was so messy that it was as if there was a huge battle, Raito first curled his lips, then pulled his right arm out from under Lin Hua's head, and then flicked her forehead hard. Lin Hua, who was flicked on the forehead, slowly opened her bloodshot eyes, and then looked at Raito with a blurry gaze, and then instinctively pounced forward, and put her delicate red lips on his. Chirp! Poochie poochie! Sizzle sizzle sizzle! After making a series of strange sounds, Lin Hua let go of Raito, licked her lips and smiled. Not bad, you can actually deal with me and Yunyang at the same time. Young man, you have a bright future. Cut the crap, get out of bed and put on your clothes. When Yunyang wakes up, we'll know how to write the word death. Seeing that this bad woman, Lin Hua, was still making a scene early in the morning, Raito gently pulled his arm from under Yunyan's head, and then pulled Lin Hua up from the bed. Why did it become like this? What was this? Cheating in front of everyone? Looking at Lin Hua, who was changing into a new set of clothes by the bed, because the dress from last night was completely torn, Raito only felt that his head was about to explode. Last night, after putting down Lin Hua and throwing him on the sofa, Raito focused on taking care of Yunyang. However, he didn't expect that after feeding her and watching her fall asleep, he would discover that there was someone squatting by the bedside. Hey, did you have fun with my little sister just now? At that time, looking at Raito with his mouth wide open, Lin Hua, who was squatting by the bed, showed him a devilish smile. Raito never thought that this woman would be able to get up so quickly. He originally thought that after being taught a good lesson by his hidden force, she would faint until the next morning to recover. But the problem was that Lin Hua herself also knew internal force. She was also a martial arts expert. Therefore, after quietly using qi to unblock all the acupoints and meridians in his body, Lin Hua quickly woke up, and then such a scene appeared. Sure, don't wake up Yunyang, let's drink, okay? Without waiting for Raito to get up from the bed, Lin Hua picked up a bottle of beer and poured it into her mouth. Then, she kissed Raito's mouth. Pause. Slurp, slurp, slurp. Just like that, Raito was forced to drink a large amount of beer, and the beer seemed to be drugged with some strange medicine, which quickly made his body hot. Kojima Lin Hua. What's wrong with you? After being forced to drink the strange medicine, what happened next was self-evident. In short, when Raito woke up in the morning, a pair of sisters were lying on his left and right. What happened last night? Don't mention it again in the future, this is not a joke, understand? After changing his clothes, Raito said to Lin Hua, who was sitting in front of the dressing table and combing her messy hair. Speaking of which, Raito and Lin Hua originally had an ill-fated relationship. The relationship between the two was neither friends nor enemies. Coupled with Yunyan's sudden intervention, it was even more chaotic. If Yunyang knew that something happened between her cousin and her boyfriend, and it happened right beside her, no matter how good her temper was, she would be so angry that she would slap Raito on the spot. Of course, this was not what Raito wanted. He did not expect that Lin Hua, this perverted woman, would be so perverted that she would force herself on him in front of her sister. She was simply crazy, there was something wrong with her brain. Don't worry. Lin Hua smiled without looking back. I'm not that kind of little girl. I've said it before, we only want a moment of pleasure. You don't have to be responsible for me, and I won't ask for anything from you. Phew. That's good. When he heard about Lin Hua, Raito was slightly relieved. After all, he was scared to death of this crazy woman. He was afraid that she would use last night's incident as an excuse to pester him. After all, after last night's all-night battle, he was actually a little scared when he saw Lin Hua, because this woman was really too powerful. If being with Downia was like playing in a small stream, being with Yunyang was like rowing a boat in a big river. Then being with Lin Hua was like running to the sea on a stormy day to dance at Paradise Disco. It was not something that normal people could enjoy. In the end, Lin Hua's situation was special. Her desire was much stronger than the average person. Coupled with the strong physique that she had obtained from practicing martial arts since she was a child, and perhaps she had taken some medicine herself, it caused her to go crazy. If it weren't for Raito's LV5 physique and the Empress Mystic technique that could greatly increase his yang qi, he would have died on the bed last night. It was too terrifying. Therefore, even if he did get a lot of pleasure with Lin Hua last night, Raito did not want to try that kind of crazy wave dancing again. It would be more relaxing to find Downia to play in the stream. At this moment, Yunyang, who was lying on the bed not far away, also woke up in a daze. The first thing that Yunyang saw when she woke up was Raito and Lin Hua sitting on the sofa drinking tea. Then, she instinctively smiled and said, "Good morning, why are you guys?" The moment she saw the two, Yunyang remembered what happened between her and Raito last night. Originally, the two of them were in an intimate relationship, so it was fine if they did it, but the problem was that they did it in her cousin's room, and they did it almost in front of her. This. At the thought of this, Yunyang's face instantly turned red like a tomato. She immediately pulled the quilt and looked at her body, but she found that her clothes were still intact. It can't be. Could it be that I'm dreaming? I didn't actually do it with Raito last night. Hiss. It hurts. After looking up at the clear sky of Paris, Raito's eyes narrowed slightly, and a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Although everyone could see that Colored Glaze was trying her best to suppress her irritation and anger, it was obvious that even the daughter of a god with strong self-control couldn't control herself that much. It had been a few hours since Colored Glaze came to the office, But in these few hours, not a single person dared to talk to her. Almost everyone was scared witless by her aura, rolling and crawling, running away with their crutches and buckets. What's wrong with big sister Lioli? Everyone was very surprised by her change, but no one dared to say a word, just like no one dared to approach a volcano that could erupt at any time. That night, Liu Li was the only one left in the huge office. The other members, including Jiao Yuan and Mingji, had already gotten off work and left. The weak light shone on the chair in the office, and the empty scene reflected on the thin figure that was particularly sad. Phew! What's going on? Doesn't this make me look like a resentful woman? Finally, Colored Glaze couldn't help but sigh, and rubbed her face hard, trying to cheer herself up. But no matter what Colored Glaze was doing recently, when she thought about how Raito and Yunyang could be happily shopping, eating, enjoying the scenery, and even being intimate in a hotel, Colored Glaze couldn't help but feel angry. Why? Why do I have to stay here and deal with so much work for the Rulong Security Company and the Black Hand Alliance? Why were those two women allowed to play with Long Jewel everywhere they went? Why were they spending their sweet time together? If she wanted to find a reason, Colored Glaze could find a lot of reasons, and they all sounded very reasonable and impeccable. For example, the current situation is more important. In order to fight against the Heavenly Eye Group and Yatsuki, we have to increase our strength as much as possible. Or, Raito and I aren't in a hurry, we have a lot of time to spend together in the future, and the separation now is for a better reunion in the future. Or, as his wife, I shouldn't fight with those two women who came later, so as to avoid losing my identity. These reasons sounded reasonable, but no matter how reasonable they were, they couldn't make Colored Glaze's mood any better. After all, things like feelings can't be solved by rational analysis and careful thinking. This is the extreme explosion of emotions, so no matter how smart a person is, as long as they fall in love with someone else, they will become a fool. Gulp. Just as Colored Glaze was alone in the office, her stomach made a cute sound, informing her master that she hasn't eaten for a long time. Ah, it's already this time. Let's go back. Only then did Colored Glaze react, looked at her watch, and began to pack up the things on the table and prepare to leave. But just as Colored Glaze reached out to turn off the computer on the table, a pair of warm arms suddenly reached out from behind and hugged the girl's slender waist from behind. My dear young lady, it's so late yet you haven't gone back. Have you been busy with work recently? In fact, there was no need to hear the familiar voice. Just the touch of the arms behind her back made Colored Glaze know who the stinky hooligan behind her was. She slowly turned her head to look, only to see Long Do's smelly face, which often appeared in her dreams but always made her want to beat him up, was only a fist away from her. Moreover, the two of them were leaning against each other, one in front and one behind. TSK. For Raito, who suddenly appeared here, Colored Glaze's first reaction was to TSK, then she sneered, I'm not very busy with work, but you've been particularly busy recently. You must be exhausted in Paris. When she thought of the scene of Raito and Yunyang being sweet in Paris, while she was a haggard woman doing housework in Tokyo, Colored Glaze was furious. But Raito said with a smile, it's a bit tiring outside, so it's better to be at home. If there's someone at home waiting for me to come back, that's even better. TMPH, who wants to wait for you to come back? When she heard this sentence, Colored Glaze couldn't help but turn her head to the side and put on a look of disdain. Of course it's you, who else? Me. I don't want to. What benefits did you give me to wait for you at home? Benefits? Speaking of which, I do have some benefits for you after this trip. Take a look at this. Benefits? Did he bring a gift for me? Although she didn't know what tricks Raito wanted to play, Colored Glaze still nodded with the mood of playing with a child. This is. But a second later, Liu Li looked at Long Do's palm in surprise. This was because he had conjured a strange ring out of nowhere as if he was performing magic. This special ring had a silver ring that looked like a coiling dragon winding into a circle. The ring was inlaid with a round pigeon blood ruby that shone with a crimson luster. The ruby flowed with bright and strong colors, giving a strong feeling of burning fire and flowing blood. Under the illumination of the light source, it could also reflect beautiful and moving 6 rays of starlight. What a beautiful ring! The moment she saw the ring, Colored Glaze immediately fell in love with the classical, subtle but gorgeous color that seemed to be dancing flames, because the feeling seemed to be somewhat similar to her. "Do you like it?" Seeing the young lady's cute, slightly open mouth, Raito smiled and said, "This is the ring I asked Tessa to help me find someone to make. I just went to get it from her. What do you think of it?" After a moment of silence, Colored Glaze slightly turned her head and said with a complicated tone, "What do you mean by what do you think? Anyway, you asked someone to make 3 rings at once, right?" Colored Glaze knew Raito's personality too well. He definitely wouldn't make a ring just for her, so Yunyang and Downia obviously had their own. "That's true, but when I got the ring, the first thing I thought of was you. How about it? Are you willing to give it a try? Try it. Now. Right now, I'll help you put it on." Before Colored Glaze could react, Raito gently held her left hand and put the ring on her slender ring finger. The ring on the ring finger of the left hand represented the meaning of engagement. In other words, this was an engagement ring. Engagement. This is my engagement ring. Looking at the ruby ring that was obviously carefully designed, as if it was made for her, Colored Glaze was stunned for a moment. Unknowingly, all of the young lady's previous annoyance and anger flew out of the sky, as if all the haze in her heart was dispelled by the flame-like crimson color. Chapter 302. This was the engagement ring that Raito gave her, and it was also his first engagement ring. This ring was now on Colored Glaze's hand. Oh. After suddenly realizing that she was being proposed to, Colored Glaze was first shocked, then she reached out and stroked the ring's scarlet ruby that seemed to be flowing with flames. Pigeon's blood red was the best type of ruby in the world, and it was also the most beautiful type. Ruby was also regarded as a stone that represented love. It was said to have the magic to make love fly 1,000 miles in a day and make 2 people happy. In addition to the beautiful ruby, this round gem design also represented virtuousness, stability, elegance, and other meanings in the ring culture. In ancient Europe, it was a style that only the wife could wear. Of course, this was also a style that Raito specially made for Colored Glaze. Downia and Yunyan's styles were not this kind. Yunyan's ring was a sky sapphire with a heart-shaped design. The heart-shaped design represented gentleness, sweetness, romance, and other meanings. Downia's ring was a golden gem with a pear-shaped design. The pear-shaped design represented liveliness, naivety, quick-wittedness, and other meanings. Each ring was commissioned by Raito Tessa to find the best craftsman and spend a lot of money to make it. He strived to make all the rings conform to the temperament and characteristics of the holder. This took Tessa a lot of effort. Red, blue, and yellow were the 3 colors that couldn't be further broken down. They were the so-called 3 primary colors of pigment, which also corresponded to the colors of Colored Glaze, Yunyang, and Downia's rings. The reason why Raito chose the 3 primary colors of pigment as the colors of the 3 rings was also a special metaphor. That was, after the 3 primary colors overlapped, it would become completely black. As an extreme Dao who walked in the dark, Raito liked the feeling of being in the dark, because only in a world of darkness could he see other colors more clearly. Therefore, his color was undoubtedly black, which was the color of the overlapped part of the 3 women. This was very suitable for the current relationship between the 4 of them. How is it? Are you satisfied now? This is something that belongs to you and is unique. Seeing that Colored Glaze's expression had softened, Raito smiled as he held her hand and kissed the ring. Chimpage. Who said I was going to agree to your proposal? When the Colored Glaze heard this, she turned her head away proudly, but the blush on her face and ears couldn't be hidden. Hey! Didn't we already agree to it when we swore an oath in the Shunzai courtyard a year ago? You said that you want to come to the Rulong group to be the wife of the group leader. Then, it's not time yet. Really? But you didn't act like that when you put on the ring. You looked so happy that you lost your soul. You. When she heard this, Colored Glaze couldn't hold it in any longer. She turned around and tried to slip away, but Raito held her tightly by the waist, so she couldn't escape. Grumble. Just when Colored Glaze was about to struggle, her pitiful little stomach growled again. This time, Colored Glaze's little face became even redder. Raito laughed and said, "Ha ha ha, so you're hungry. Let's go, let's find something to eat." Before he finished speaking, he reached out and carried Colored Glaze in a princess carry and walked out without hesitation. Not long after, Colored Glaze was tied up and brought into a small restaurant called Dragon Family Cuisine. What's going on? Why do I feel like I'm being kidnapped again? Seeing Long Do chatting with the middle-aged man with a knife scar over his eye, wearing a chef's uniform that was stained with blood and had a ferocious look in his eyes, Liu Li, who was sitting outside, couldn't help but feel a little scared. Deng 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 deng, sorry to keep you waiting. This is the steamed base that I specially made for Miss, please enjoy. At this time, Raito walked over with a large steamer basket. Inside the steamer basket was the main dish that he personally cooked tonight, a plump base. However, when she saw the fragrant bass, Colored Glaze first looked at the fish, then looked at Raito, as if she saw something unbelievable. One must know that the cooking method of steaming directly reflected the quality of the fish, and it was also a dish that tested the chef's basic cooking skills. After all, fish was very delicate. If it was overcooked, the juice would be evaporated and the meat would be overcooked. However, if it was too raw, it would be easy for it to have a fishy taste, so the steaming time had to be calculated accurately in seconds. At this time, the fish in front of Miss Colored Glaze was steamed beautifully. After steaming, the cut marks on the fish's body were like blooming flowers, and the inside was white and delicate. The beautiful marble-like fish meat was also flowing with crystal-clear chopped green onion and soy sauce. When Raito brought the fragrant steamed fish over, Colored Glaze, who had been hungry for half a day, couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. However, she still asked in confusion, "This fish was steamed by you?" "Of course it was made by me. It's Chinese-style steamed fish. Eat it while it's hot, it won't taste good when it's cold." Facing Colored Glaze's doubts, Raito hurriedly stuffed the chopsticks into her hands and urged her to quickly try his cooking. If this dish was made by the restaurant owner, Colored Glaze wouldn't find it strange. However, after knowing him for so long, this was the first time Colored Glaze knew that Raito could cook. This was really too strange, right? You're an extreme boss, but you know how to cook. And it's Chinese cuisine. Can this thing really be eaten? Don't tell me it's a super dark cuisine like Yunyan's. However, Colored Glaze only thought about it. Now that Raito had brought the dish over, she had to eat it even if she didn't want to. However, when Colored Glaze picked up a piece of fish with her chopsticks, she almost felt the crystal-clear meat on her chopsticks tremble slightly. Obviously, this fish was steamed very successfully. The juices were overflowing and it was very fresh and tender. It was neither undercooked nor overcooked. The timing was perfect. In fact, Colored Glaze's favorite food since she was born was fish. As the saying goes, the benevolent likes mountains, while the wise likes water. Leshan eats mountain delicacies, eating until one's brain fats up. Leshan eats seafood, gaining wisdom after eating. Of course, this was just a saying. The reason why Liu Li liked to eat fish was mainly because she didn't like to eat fatty and heavy meat. She preferred light fish. Therefore, Raito, who knew this, didn't order a table of cold bean sprouts, spicy prawns, kung pao chicken, shredded pork with yuxiong, and dan dan noodles like he did when he brought Yunyang over. Instead, he personally steamed a fish for his fiancée. Although Colored Glaze had eaten fish for many years, it was her first time seeing such oily and juicy fish meat that was smoother than tofu. The base that Raito picked was white and plump. When the fish meat with fish fat and marrow entered her mouth, it was so fresh that she could swallow her tongue. It crazily attacked Lady Colored Glaze's taste buds. In an instant, she felt like she was floating on a lonely boat in the sea. Countless bass flew out from the sea and crazily pounced on her. It's so delicious. What should I do if I can't eat such delicious fish in the future? After taking a bite, Colored Glaze couldn't help but cover her head and yell in her heart. How is it? Is it okay? Seeing Colored Glaze holding back her tears while eating the fish, Raito sat opposite her with a smile and poured her a cup of tea. When did you master such a strange skill? You actually know how to make Chinese cuisine? Maybe I was from there in my previous life. Nonsense, forget it if you don't want to say. After glaring at Raito, Colored Glaze ate the entire steamed base deliciously and drank a big mouthful of tea in satisfaction. At this time, Colored Glaze put down the teacup and said in a strange tone, "Well done, how many girls have you eaten this dish before?" "No, no." Raito hurriedly shook his head and said, "So far, you're the first." "Oh. Then will you cook it for Yunyang and Downia in the future?" Although Colored Glaze asked this on the surface, her eyes said, "Do you dare to say yes? I'll strangle you to death." "No, no, no, I'll cook another dish for them. This dish will be yours, is that okay?" "That's more like it. Let's go back." After eating her fill and enjoying Raito's service, Colored Glaze stood up in satisfaction. Beep beep. But at this time, the phone in her pocket suddenly rang. This is... Colored Glaze picked up the phone and looked at the message on it. She frowned. "What's wrong?" Raito hurriedly asked after seeing her suddenly dignified expression. "Something happened. Yatsuki really made a move." Colored Glaze glanced at Raito and then looked at the message on the phone. In fact, the message was very simple. It was to inform Colored Glaze that she would attend a banquet in 3 days and inform her to bring a male companion with her. If it was just this, it wouldn't be enough for Colored Glaze to say that sentence. The problem was, the host of that banquet is Iwasaki Yanasuke, the president of the Great Nippon Bank, and his identity is one of the Golden Heron 3 of Yatsuki, and the male companion they asked me to bring is you. What? When he heard Colored Glaze's words, Raito couldn't help but widen his eyes slightly. A long time ago, Raito learned about the structure of Yatsuki from Colored Glaze. It was a 3-level structure at the pyramid level. The Golden Heron was composed of 3 leaders who ruled the religious world, the political world, and the business world. The Dark Crow was composed of 12 prominent families and business tycoons from all walks of life, as well as hundreds of last feather below. And this time, Iwasaki Yanasuke, who hosted the banquet and invited Colored Glaze and Raito, was one of the 3 leaders of Yatsuki, the president of the Great Nippon Bank, known as the Emperor of Business. Chapter 303. The Great Nippon Bank was the central bank of Japan. It was often referred to as the Bank of Japan. It was the oldest bank in the country. It had a history of more than 100 years. Half of the bank's capital was funded by the government. It was a joint stock central bank, and it was a listed company. In other words, it was a company that was half public and half private. Because of the special nature of the central bank, the president of the Great Nippon Bank was no ordinary person. The current president, Iwasaki Yanasuke, was even more so. Iwasaki Yanasuke is an extremely rare Yatsuki in the history of the Yatsuki. He started as a commoner and climbed to the top of the country in just half a century. There's no doubt about his ability. When the name Golden Heron was mentioned, even Colored Glaze couldn't help but become serious. That was because this man was indeed a strong opponent. It was said that Yanasuke, who started out as a businessman, was extremely cunning and fickle. Although he always had a smile on his face and the angle of his bow was perfect, he would stab anyone in the back. To put it simply, he was a top-level scumbag. But why would such a top-level scumbag invite Colored Glaze and Raito to attend his banquet? This banquet seems to be Yanasuke's daughter's engagement banquet. Mother was also invited to attend, but she said that she's not in good health, so she invited me instead. Not in good health? Isn't Lady Rui Hui's condition better? Yeah, she's fine, but she still pretends to be weak and sickly. She says that she wants to lure out some parasites in the family. Lure out some parasites in the family. Was it Kamishiro Yoshiyuki and filial piety Kanzaki? Speaking of which, ever since Raito became famous, Yoshiyuki and filial piety Kanzaki hadn't appeared in front of him for a long time. Of course, Rui Hui also played a part in this. When Rui Hui was still alive, with her ability and prestige, she could have managed the entire Kamiyoshi in an orderly manner. But even so, it did not mean that the whole family was of the same mind as her. That was why Rui Hui had once said that before starting a war with the Heavenly Eye Group, she had to clean up all the parasites in the house. She was probably planning to take advantage of this opportunity to make her move. In the original timeline of Red Photo Album 2, no survivors, Rui Hui was about to die, and Colored Glaze was about to take over, and Yoshiyuki and his son were causing trouble for her. Following Rui Hui's death, the activities of the Heavenly Eye group became more and more unrestrained. The subsequent plot would accelerate towards destruction and war. However, this was a matter of another world line. Now that Rui Hui was still alive, and with the addition of Raito, a special factor that didn't exist before, the future would naturally become more chaotic and unpredictable. Raito's ability to predict the future would also become smaller and smaller. But no matter what, now that the Yatsuki had come to his door, Raito had to respond. Since they specifically asked Colored Glaze to bring Raito as a male companion, it meant that they definitely knew about the relationship between the two. But this was also very normal. After all, Colored Glaze and Raito usually didn't hide it too much. Previously, there was a door cleaning incident that swept the entire school in Dori First High School. As long as someone investigated, it wasn't difficult to find out that these two guys were very close. So Raito sneered. "What should we do this time? They seem to be planning to use our relationship as an example, right? Will they use this to make things difficult for me and the Kamiyoshi clan?" Kanzaki Colored Glaze, as the next vegetarian king of the Kamiyoshi clan, was a golden signboard of the religious world, and the religious world was one of the 3 golden herons of the Yatsuki clan. Naturally, they wouldn't allow Colored Glaze to do as she pleased. And if Colored Glaze's lover was an underground member like Raito Kiri, who was the leader of the Yatsuki forces that were completely hostile to the Yatsuki clan, then their reaction would definitely be even more intense. In the past 6 months, the pressure from the Yatsuki clan had basically been blocked by Lady Rui Hui. But although Rui Hui had the ability to reach the heavens, her position was only that of the Dark Crows. Even the strongest of the Dark Crows couldn't go against the Golden Herons. After all, in this society, there was a lot of emphasis on seniority and seniority. Although most of the time, this was to make it easier for those in power to oppress others and take advantage of their seniority. Because of this, Rui Hui couldn't go against the Golden Herons. In other words, this time when the Golden Herons made their move, it would be difficult to rely on Lady Rui Hui's help to deal with it. Raito and Colored Glaze had to think of a way by themselves. Otherwise, it wasn't hard to imagine that the two of them would become the target of public criticism at the banquet. At the same time, they would be besieged by the religious world, the political world, and the business world. This was much scarier than the mascot queen, Shiwa Tenya. Colored Glaze naturally understood this, so she nodded and calmly said, "Mim. Give me 10 seconds. Before she finished speaking, she used her slender thumb and index finger to pick up a bunch of soft hair that was hanging down to her side and began to rub it as if she was making a fireball. Seeing that Colored Glaze had entered a state of deep thought, Raito couldn't help but pick up a bottle of beer from the side. With a push of his thumb, the cap fell off and he poured the beer into his mouth. At the same time, pieces of puzzle pieces quickly flashed through Colored Glaze's mind. Among them were Yasutoru, Kamiyoshi, Black Hand Alliance, and Heavenly Eye Group. How to solve the current problem? Yasutoru must have been prepared for this sudden attack. There were only 2 results they wanted. One was to ensure that Colored Glaze, the next vegetarian king, wouldn't have any problems to maintain the stability of the religious world. The second was to eliminate Raito, a super uncertain factor, and prevent a situation similar to the previous Kokyo incident from happening again. The advantage of Yasutoru was that no one in this country could resist the monstrous power. The religious organization headed by Shinto. The Chamber of Commerce headed by Great Nippon Bank. The administrative organization headed by Cabinet. The combination of religion, business, and politics formed a huge territory of power. Basically, there was nothing they couldn't do in this country. But was Yasutoru a perfect organization? Obviously not, because in Colored Glaze's view, they lacked an important factor, violence. The ancient Yasutoru was a perfect organization formed by the triangular combination of the military, religion, and politics. Religion was responsible for maintaining faith and supporting politics and the military. Politics was responsible for establishing laws and maintaining religion and the military. The military was responsible for protecting religion and politics so that their personal safety would not be threatened. The previous Yasutoru triangular combination of the military, religion, and politics could indeed be called a very perfect organizational form. The three supported each other and mutually benefited each other. It was almost invulnerable. But after the defeat, Nippon was like a wild dog with its teeth pulled out. This corner of the military collapsed directly, and the third leg of Yasutoru had to be temporarily replaced by the Chamber of Commerce. Obviously, in terms of violence, the violence of the Chamber of Commerce and the violence of the military were in a completely different dimension. No matter how powerful a businessman was, he was just a businessman. Compared to the military, he was like a child in the presence of an adult. He had no ability to maintain this system at all. And speaking of violence, the Black Hand Alliance led by Raito happened to be composed of a group of extreme gangsters who started with violence. Even after joining the professional mercenaries of the Rulong Security Company, they became stronger to the point where they could hold the Maro Kumar Mafia up and beat them up. It was already considered extremely violent. In this case, if the two sides competed in connections, financial resources, and relationships, then Raito's side had absolutely no chance of winning. After all, Yasutoru was the party that made the rules. But, if the two sides competed in the most primitive violence, then it was different. The more powerful and rich a person was, the more afraid of death. This was especially true for those who had not experienced the flames of war and had not experienced life and death situations. If one thought in this direction, then the answer would be clear at a glance. Da. The moment she thought of this, Colored Glaze's fingers suddenly stopped moving. At the same time, the pair of eyes that emitted a murderous aura suddenly opened. It's decided. All of you who are sitting high up on your rotten skeletal thrones, prepare to be nailed to your coffins by me from now on. After thinking it through, Colored Glaze raised her slender finger and hooked it, signaling Raito to put his ear closer. What is going on? He even made it so secretive. Raito looked around the empty restaurant. Although he did not know what Colored Glaze wanted to say, he still obediently put his ear closer. Let's start preparing tonight. In the afternoon 3 days later. Finally, that guy, grumble, crackle, rustle, rustle. Just as Colored Glaze finished her plan in one breath, she casually picked up the teacup and took a sip. Beside her, Raito revealed a shocked expression. Is there a mistake? Is she serious? She actually wants to play this big. Although Raito also wanted to compete with Yatsuki this time, he did not expect Colored Glaze to go to this extent. This was really too much of a hooligan. Raito was the head of the Rulong group, the leader of the hooligans. If even he felt that Colored Glaze's plan was hooligan, then it could be seen how terrifying this plan was. After a moment, he said in a low voice, if we really do this, a lot of people might die. It doesn't matter. If not enough people die, we won't be able to intimidate those old ghosts. Colored Glaze finished her tea and smashed the cup on the table. She sneered, after all, I want them to know that they can't do whatever they want with the protection of Yatsuki. There will always be someone who will come out of the darkness and crush their throats. At this point, Colored Glaze took a deep breath and her expression became extremely cold. It was hard to imagine that the girl who came up with an incomparably cruel plan and was prepared to mercilessly send many people to their deaths was actually the same girl who was happy to receive a wedding ring not long ago. But this was the Colored Glaze. This was the Colored Glaze now. For her own future, for Raito's future, for the future of the Kamiyoshi clan. At this time, Colored Glaze had already transformed into a witch who used all her wisdom on killing and scheming. Even if her hands were stained with blood, she would not hesitate. Those who block me, die. Chapter 304. That night, when Raito and Colored Glaze finished discussing the arrangements for the banquet 3 days later. In a huge villa located in the Setagaya district of Tokyo, A middle-aged man who looked to be in his 50s stood respectfully beside an elegant tea table and said something to the old man sitting at the tea table. Iwasaki-sama, the matters of the Kamiyoshi clan have been arranged. Do you have any other orders? Upon closer inspection, this middle-aged man was Kamishiro Yoshiyuki, who met Raito and colored glaze before and was called by Ruehue as the parasite in the family. However, the elder brother of Kamiyoshi was nodding and bowing to the old man at the tea table, showing an extremely humble attitude. It was obvious at a glance that the difference in status between the two was obvious. Good. Very good. Thank you for your hard work. Well done. After hearing Yoshiyuki's report, Iwasaki Yanasuke, who was sitting at the tea table, nodded slightly and showed his trademark strange smile. Anyone who has seen the president of the Great Japanese Bank would probably have a deep impression of his unique smile. Iwasaki, who was in his 70s, still looked very energetic. His white hair stood on his head. Because he smiled too much, his muscles seemed to be fixed in a smiling posture. When he wiggled, it felt a little weird. A fake smile, 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 a fake smile. In short, whenever Iwasaki Yanasuke showed this kind of smile, Yoshiyuki couldn't help but shudder secretly because this Yatsuki, one of the 3 golden herons, gave off a really scary feeling. It was as if he was dealing with an old monster with a strange smile mask. Therefore, when he was praised by Iwasaki-sama, Yoshiyuki hurriedly bowed and said, "No, no, no. This time, my son, filial piety, can marry Iwasaki-sama's daughter. This is a great blessing for Kamiyoshi. This is a small matter, a small matter, a small matter. Marriage." From Yoshiyuki's words, the one who would be engaged to Iwasaki Yanasuke's daughter in the engagement banquet 3 days later was actually Kamishiro Yoshiyuki's son, filial piety Kanzaki. But so far, only Iwasaki and Yoshiyuki knew about this top-secret information. Even their children didn't know anything about it. But Ruehue Kanzaki claimed to be sick and didn't come. Is her health really that bad? That should be right. The women of the Kanzaki family are all in poor health. Almost all of the previous generations have died around this age. That woman's condition has been very poor recently. She has been resting in bed for a long time. When talking about Ruehue's health, Yoshiyuki didn't sound like an older brother talking about his younger sister at all. Instead, he sounded like he was talking about an enemy. But in fact, that was indeed the case. In an environment like the Kamiyoshi that obviously favored females over males, plus he had such an excellent younger sister like Ruehue, Yoshiyuki had been living in the shadows since he was young. That was how he developed his dark personality. That's good. Hearing this, the corners of Iwasaki's mouth curled up slightly. Of the current generation of Yatsuki, although Iwasaki was the highest-level golden heron, there was someone in the middle-level dark crows that Iwasaki had to be on guard against, and that was Kanzaki Rui. Ruehue Kanzaki was a very special woman. Her ability was far above the other dark crows. It could even be said that the other 11 dark crows couldn't be compared to her at all. Logically speaking, such a woman would be the best golden heron candidate for the Yatsuki in the future. However, the Kamiyoshi seemed to be a little restless recently. They were actually very close to Raito Kiri, which made the golden herons very unhappy. Who was Raito Kiri? He was the boss of the Black Hand Alliance, the most arrogant extreme dojo in all of Tokyo. He was a restless person who had broken away from the Yatsuki's control. Ever since the concept of extreme dojo arose in Japan, the extreme dojo in the country should be the dogs raised by politicians. In other words, the dogs raised by the Yatsuki should be under their control. However, the Rulone group obviously wasn't such a dog. Ever since Torio Kazuma established this extreme dojo organization, they had nothing to do with politicians. When his son, Raito, took over the organization, they became even more extreme. They even absorbed a large number of other extreme dojo and formed the Black Hand Alliance, a huge extreme dojo organization. Now, the Black Hand Alliance had grown to the point where even the Yatsuki didn't dare to act rashly. They had become a huge hidden danger. And Iwasaki suspected that Ruehue Kanzaki was behind all these drastic changes. What exactly was the Kamiyoshi doing? Or rather, what exactly was Ruehue Kanzaki trying to do? Iwasaki and the other two golden herons couldn't guess. However, everyone knew that this situation couldn't continue. Otherwise, Ruehue Kanzaki would use her identity as a dark crow to obtain power that surpassed the golden herons. They had to be serious about the Kamiyoshi. This was what the three golden herons thought, which was why this banquet was held. Yoshiyuki-kun. Ah. Yes, what are your orders, Iwasaki-sama? Just as we previously discussed, at the banquet 3 days from now, I will announce the dirty relationship between Kanzaki-colored glaze and Raito Kiri. I will then request that Ruehue Kanzaki be removed from her position as the leader. At that time, you will be the leader of the Kamiyoshi. You must do your best, understand? After repeating his plan, Iwasaki's eyes flashed with a sharp light. Just as colored glaze had predicted, this banquet was indeed targeted at the Kamiyoshi. Not only that, the goal was to remove Ruehue Kanzaki from her position as the leader of the Kamiyoshi Kagura. Of course, although Iwasaki was a golden heron, removing Ruehue Kanzaki from her position as the leader of the Kamiyoshi Kagura wouldn't be so simple. He could indeed make such a proposal, but it would require the votes of all the Dark Crows. At that time, as long as more than 2/3 of the 11 Dark Crows voted in favor of the proposal would be carried out. 2/3, which meant that more than 8 Dark Crows would need to agree. Iwasaki was quite confident about this. After all, the status of the golden herons was higher than the Dark Crows. This time, dealing with the Kamiyoshi tribe was the idea of the 3 great golden herons. The Dark Crows below them had no reason to object. Furthermore, at the banquet 3 days from now, Ruehue Kanzaki wouldn't be able to personally attend due to her illness. That made things even simpler. If Ruehue was present, the other Dark Crows might hesitate due to her abilities and feelings. Chapter 305. The current Raito Kiri had become a well-known figure in Tokyo. No matter where he went, he would receive a lot of strange gazes. If it was half a year ago, the group of officials and nobles gathered at the Iwasaki residence would definitely look at Ryudo with disdain. They might even curse at him. How can a piece of trash like you come here? After all, Raito's identity was extreme do, and they were nobles in the true sense of the word. They were a group of old men who could represent the upper class of this country. A group of old men like them naturally wouldn't look down on a mere extreme do. It was already good enough that they didn't treat him like a dog. However, after the Kokyo incident half a year ago, as well as the rapid development of the Black Hand Alliance, no one dared to look at Raito with disdain, nor did they dare to say anything in front of him. Because everyone knew that he was a madman, and it wasn't strange for him to do anything. As nobles of the upper-class society, they naturally wouldn't go and compete with a lunatic. That would be too low of a status. That was exactly what was going on. It definitely wasn't because they were afraid of dragon duels. Definitely not, probably not. Hey, isn't that lady Miss Kanzaki? However, when Longdo walked in with the slender and beautiful young girl beside him, most of the others finally reacted to the identity of the young girl holding his arm. Although she wasn't as famous as Raito now, Colored Glaze's reputation in Tokyo was definitely not bad. Basically, there wasn't anyone in the upper class who didn't know this Miss Kanzaki. But the question was, why? Why would such a situation occur? Why would the dignified eldest daughter of the Kanzaki family come together with such a hooligan? Moreover, she was even holding his arm and walking intimately with him inside. It can't be, right? Could it be that Kanzaki Colored Glaze and him? Impossible, absolutely impossible. A few people who thought of this shook their heads. Obviously, they all knew the identity of Colored Glaze. As the next vegetarian king, it was impossible for Colored Glaze to associate with men, let alone with a scum like Raito, who was not tolerated by the upper class. Are you sure? They seem to be looking at you with very surprised eyes. Raito said softly to Colored Glaze as the two of them walked towards the grand and elegant main entrance of the mansion under the gazes of many pairs of eyes. Naturally, Liu Li knew very well what kind of commotion the two of them would cause when they arrived at the scene so intimately. Even so, she still did it without hesitation. The way she held Raito's arm and walked in Iwasaki Yanasuke's courtyard with her head held high seemed to be a provocation to someone. "You bunch of trash, you all treat me, colored glaze Kanzaki, as a mascot, a decoration, right? You even need to complain about whether I have a boyfriend or not. I'm going to be intimate with a man right now, what do you think? You don't like it? Even if you don't like it, you better hold it in." After hearing Raito's question, Colored Glaze sneered and said, "It doesn't matter anymore. Anyway, no matter what we do here, they won't let us go. It's better to be open about it." "That's true. Since we've already shed all pretense of cordiality, let's fight openly." After feeling the domineering attitude of Colored Glaze, Raito also straightened his back and walked inside without any hesitation. When the two of them arrogantly passed through the main entrance under the gazes of the crowd, they were greeted by a similarly stylish and narrow corridor. Both sides of the corridor were decorated with strange-looking oil paintings, and each painting depicted a different scene. From the perspective of Raito, who had no talent in art, these paintings were almost no different from graffiti. In short, it was impossible to tell what the painter wanted to express at a glance. So he couldn't help but laugh and said, "Such strange paintings. That guy Iwasaki has the nerve to put them in front of his house. These are the favorite works of art of the upper class. Can you understand them?" "No." Raito shook his head. "That's right. These things are meant to be incomprehensible to others. Paintings that can be understood by ordinary people are not valuable." After hearing Colored Glaze's strange explanation, Raito couldn't help but laugh and said, "Then those people of the upper class, such as that guy Iwasaki, can understand them himself? They don't need to understand. After all, that group of trash only needs these paintings to show their status, to show their noble status that is different from ordinary people. They don't care about art at all." Colored Glaze disdainfully threw out such a sentence. Then, as if she was too lazy to look at these strange paintings that were soaked in the aura of the upper class, she quickly walked forward into the hall. When Raito and Colored Glaze arrived at the main hall, the spacious and luxurious hall inside was already filled with people standing and sitting. Unlike ordinary banquets, most of the people who came to attend this banquet were older. Most of them were wearing solemn, old-fashioned kimonos or suits. Some were chatting with others, some were sitting by themselves calmly, and some were tasting high-class red wine or sake. Just by looking at them with the naked eye, one could feel that the identity of this group of people was different from the rest. After all, most of them were successful entrepreneurs or powerful politicians. There were also some believers who wore clergy robes mixed in. As Raito and Colored Glaze walked in, many people's eyes unconsciously fell on them. One must know that at this time, most of the people here were either middle-aged or old men. Only a few were young. In addition, these two young people were dragons and phoenixes among men. Naturally, they were very conspicuous. Even to the extent that some people whispered to the two people who walked in with their arms around each other, "Hey, isn't that the young miss of Kamiyoshi?" Why would? Sure, don't say things that shouldn't be said. This kind of thing is not something we can comment on. I feel like there's going to be a good show today. A storm is coming. Most of the people here were smart. Most of them were veterans in the political and business world. When they saw Colored Glaze openly holding Raito's arm and coming here, they already guessed the attitude of the Kamiyoshi. Actually, before this banquet started, there were already people who secretly spread the news that the three golden herons of Yatsuki were dissatisfied with the Kamiyoshi and wanted to use certain methods to deal with them. Now that they saw Colored Glaze and Raito strutting into Iwasaki's headquarters, everyone more or less understood the attitude of this Kanzaki young miss. It was almost the same as declaring war. But even so, the surrounding guests didn't say anything, because this matter didn't have anything to do with their own interests. If the golden herons wanted to deal with the Kamiyoshi, then the three golden herons would naturally take action. It wouldn't be up to anyone else to interfere. Especially in such a tense atmosphere, no one would dare to say anything in front of Colored Glaze and Raito, except for some brainless idiots. Yo, isn't this colored glaze? Why are you so late? Just as Raito and colored glaze were about to find an empty table to sit down, a very annoying voice came from an elegant four-seater table nearby. The two of them turned around and saw Kamishiro Yoshiyuki sitting there calmly. Sitting together with him were three other guests who looked very imposing. They were probably Yoshiyuki's friends. Perhaps it was because he was on Iwasaki Yanasuke's side, or perhaps it was because he knew that Rui Hui and colored glaze were about to be finished. In short, when Yoshiyuki saw this niece of his who gave him a lot of headaches in the early years, he unconsciously used the attitude of an elder. After hearing him speak as if he was the winner, colored glaze walked over with a smile and replied, "I'm a little late." "I'm very sorry, Uncle Yoshiyuki." "Oh. Why is this guy acting so submissive towards me? Could it be that he already knows that the Kamiyoshi clan will be under my control in the future?" When Yoshiyuki saw that the colored glaze didn't show any special reaction and even had a faint smile on her face, he became even bolder. Therefore, in front of his three old friends, he put on a haughty attitude and said to his niece, "The rule here is that if you're late, you'll have to drink as a punishment. Colored glaze, you can't break the rules." "Yes, she'll drink as a punishment. She'll drink 3 glasses as a punishment." "Ha ha ha. Don't be so mean. She's a young lady after all. Just drink 1 glass as a punishment. But this wine has 40 to 50 degrees. 1 glass is enough to choke you." At this moment, Yoshiyuki's 3 old friends who were sitting beside him also started laughing and talking as if they were bullying a newcomer. However, when Liu Li heard this, she smiled and said, "3 cups, right? No problem. Since it's the rule here, I have to abide by it." "Ha ha ha, you're really becoming more and more sensible. Come, Uncle will help you fill the glass." When he found out that colored glaze was actually prepared to drink, Yoshiyuki suddenly smiled from ear to ear. He quickly picked up the glass and poured 3 full glasses of brandy. Then, he sat on the chair with a smile and prepared to watch colored glaze make a fool of herself. As her biological uncle, Yoshiyuki naturally knew that colored glaze couldn't drink. If she drank 3 glasses of such a high alcohol content wine, even a grown man would inevitably get drunk, let alone a little girl like her. Therefore, Yoshiyuki was also prepared to generously nod his head when colored glaze cried that she couldn't drink. He wanted to show his magnanimity as an elder in front of his friends, as well as his magnanimity as the next ruler of Kamiyoshi. However, what Yoshiyuki didn't expect was that when colored glaze picked up the glass, she didn't pour it into her mouth at all. Instead, she brought it to Yoshiyuki's head who was sitting on the chair. After raising the glass to Yoshiyuki's head, colored glaze slowly tilted the glass with a smile, letting the wine inside slowly pour towards the middle-aged man's head. It was like watering a flower. Chapter 306. For a moment, almost everyone in the hall was stunned. Colored glaze and Raito were the focus of many people's attention. At this time, Kamiyoshi's daughter actually raised her wine glass and poured water on their heads. This scene naturally attracted everyone's attention. What's going on? Feeling the fragrant wine dripping down from his head, from his hair, cheeks, neck, and all the way to his clothes, Kamishiro Yoshiyuki was even more stunned. He couldn't imagine, he didn't dare to imagine, that colored glaze would do such a thing in such a grand public place. After being drenched for a full 2 seconds, Yoshiyuki's expression changed. He wanted to quickly stand up and angrily scold his niece. But the moment Yoshiyuki was about to stand up, 2 strong hands suddenly pressed down on his shoulders. "Don't be in such a hurry to get up, we haven't finished drinking yet." Yoshiyuki turned his head stiffly and saw Raito looking at him with a kind smile. Although Raito was smiling, his eyes were not smiling at all. Instead, it was a "try moving again and I'll kill you. I'm going to kill you, okay? I'll die. If I continue to struggle, I'll be killed by this kid." When he felt the biting cold murderous intent, Yoshiyuki's body began to tremble slightly. He could only sit still and enjoy his niece's wine pouring on his head. Traces of wine formed a straight line from the wine glass and finally fell on Yoshiyuki's body. The burning wine and the gazes of the surrounding people made him feel particularly ashamed and resentful, as if he was being publicly executed. What was more infuriating was that Lioli poured the wine very slowly. She didn't pour the wine in the face like a girl would do when she was angry. Instead, she tilted the glass bit by bit like watering flowers, letting the wine drip down slowly. Humiliation. This was obviously a kind of humiliation, an extreme kind of humiliation. After about 30 seconds, colored glaze poured all the wine in the glass on Yoshiyuki's head. At this time, the latter's entire face and upper body were wet, looking like a monkey that was hit by the rain. Crazy. These two people are crazy. They even dared to mess with their own uncle. And it was at Iwasaki-sama's banquet. Looking at colored glaze humiliating Yoshiyuki, the people present did nothing but watch silently. There was nothing they needed to do. Other than lamenting that colored glaze and Raito's brains were abnormal, this group of upper-class gentlemen did not say anything because this had nothing to do with them, it was just an internal strife of the Kamiyoshi. Some of the attendants and bodyguards who originally wanted to come over and stop them, after being glared at by Raito, obediently retreated, not daring to look over. After the wine ran dry, colored glaze put the glass back on the table with a smile and said to Yoshiyuki with a smile, "How is it? Uncle Yoshiyuki, is my apology enough?" Enough, enough. Although Yoshiyuki's face was already red with anger, Raito's two hands were firmly gripping his shoulders like an iron clamp. Yoshiyuki could only grit his teeth and pretend as if nothing had happened. However, colored glaze continued to smile and said, "But uncle just poured 3 glasses of wine, how should we deal with the other 2 glasses? This." Looking at the 2 glasses of brandy still on the table, Yoshiyuki swallowed a mouthful of saliva and seemed to understand colored glaze's meaning. "Drink. Of course, I, as your uncle, will drink on your behalf." Before his voice fell, Yoshiyuki quickly picked up the glasses from the table and poured the 2 glasses of wine into his throat. When he drank the brandy that was more than 40 degrees, Yoshiyuki only felt a burning sensation in his throat and stomach. This made him quickly cover his mouth to prevent himself from spitting out the wine on the spot. But even so, it was much better than continuing to be drenched in 2 glasses of wine in public. Yoshiyuki really didn't want to experience the extreme shame of being publicly executed a second time. Otherwise, how could he face people in the future? Seeing Yoshiyuki being humiliated by Raito and colored glaze to the point where he couldn't even lift his head, the 3 friends at the table had their mouths wide open. It was as if they couldn't imagine that these 2 people would dare to do such a hooligan act here. "Hey, you 3. At this time, Raito looked at the 3 of them and asked in an amiable tone, "Do you want to drink too?" We. No need, right?" Looking at Yoshiyuki who was just drenched, the 3 upper-class people who didn't know what they were doing quickly shook their heads at Raito. "Since you don't want to drink, then why are you still sitting here? Hurry up and find a place to rest." Although Raito's expression and tone were very amiable, the 3 of them understood the core meaning of his words. "We want this table, get out of here." Although the leader of the Black Hand Alliance didn't say it out loud, the 3 of them immediately looked at each other and walked to another table with cold sweat dripping down their backs. Raito, on the other hand, pulled a chair with a relaxed expression and directly sat beside the trembling Yoshiyuki. He didn't say anything and just sat beside him. What are these 2 guys doing? It's not like there's no place to sit. Why do you have to steal my friend's table?" When colored glaze also sat beside Raito, Yoshiyuki, who was forced to sit at the same table as these 2 crazy people, really regretted his previous actions. He originally wanted to show off in front of his friends, but he didn't expect to attract these 2 gods of plague. Obviously, there weren't any tables around to sit at. Of course not. The reason why Raito insisted on sitting beside Yoshiyuki and driving the 3 of them away was very simple, and that was killing the chicken to warn the monkey, knocking the mountain to warn the tiger. Not bad, nicely done. This kid is quite the character. At this moment, many of the smart people around had already understood Raito's intention. Most of them had already guessed that this extreme Dao leader was invited here because Lord Iwasaki wanted to deal with him. Perhaps he wanted to deal with the Kamiyoshi clan as well. After being invited here, Raito's tyrannical behavior expressed his attitude. You can play any tricks you want. Come, let's see who will be the unlucky one in the end. Also, don't think that I won't dare to do anything just because this is your territory. There's nothing in the world that I don't dare to do. Therefore, from a certain perspective, Raito did not slap Yoshiyuki's face just now, but the owner of this place, Iwasaki Yanasuke's face. In this situation, most of the people around were whispering and laughing while discussing what might happen in a while. They were basically in a state of silence. Clatter. But not long after, a burst of applause came from the high platform above the second-floor stairs in the deepest part of the hall. Under the expectant gaze of countless people, a very amiable old man with a smiling face appeared there. It's him, Lord Iwasaki Yanasuke is here. Seeing one of the 3 golden herons, the people present also applauded politely. Some of them even raised their wine glasses to Iwasaki as a sign of respect. Thank you very much for today's guests for giving me, Iwasaki Yanasuke, face and taking time out of your busy schedule to attend my daughter's engagement ceremony. Thank you. Having said that, Iwasaki, who was standing high on the second floor, lowered his head slightly and made a very standard 30-degree bow to thank the people below. That posture was really awesome. In the early years, Iwasaki Yanasuke was once known as the master of bowing. His 30-degree bow was indeed 30 degrees. Even if it was measured with a protractor, it would not be wrong. After bowing, Iwasaki smiled and pulled a young lady who was dressed in a gorgeous kimono. She had wide eyes, a flat nose, and thick lips. At first glance, she looked like a catfish. Not only that, but she also weighed at least 200 pounds. Iwasaki pulled her to his side. I'm sure everyone has met my daughter, Iwasaki Leiko. Because Leiko has been busy with her studies and career, she hasn't gotten married for many years. Today, she finally found someone she likes, so this old man organized this engagement ceremony for this beautiful couple. I'd like to introduce my future son-in-law to everyone. Filial piety, come here. At the end of his speech, Iwasaki gestured with his eyes. The young man standing behind, Filial piety Kanzaki, walked to Iwasaki Leiko's side with a smile on his face as if he was going to the execution ground. Raito had seen Filial piety Kanzaki before. This guy's face was pale and his body was thin and weak. At first glance, it was obvious that he was a womanizer. He was the type who would go overboard and lose out on himself. When such a thin and weak filial son stood next to his fiancée, Li Zi, who weighed more than 100 kilograms, it felt as if a loach was shivering beside a fat catfish. It felt as if the fat catfish could crush the loach into a dried loach if it were to press on him. Of course, Filial piety Kanzaki found it hard to accept the fact that he suddenly had such a beautiful fiancée. Oh my God, what sin did I commit in my past life? Why is father doing this to me? When Filial piety Kanzaki looked down from the second floor and saw his father, Yoshiyuki Kanzaki, who was sitting with colored glaze and Raito, his eyes flashed with obvious hatred. It had to be said that Yoshiyuki was really a loyal father. He sold his son to Iwasaki as a son-in-law without asking for his son's permission. Furthermore, he didn't even let Filial piety see what his fiancée looked like. He had kept Riko's situation a secret until now. As a matter of fact, when he first saw his fiancée, Li Zi, who was described by his father as a national beauty, Xiaoxing was so angry that he almost fainted on the spot. How was she even human? She didn't even wear makeup when she acted as Jubaji. Puff. Seeing the filial son Filial piety glaring angrily at his father Yoshiyuki from afar, Raito couldn't help but laugh. However, even though he was laughing, he still wouldn't forget to do what he had to do. So he quietly took out his phone from his pants and sent a message to Sensible that said, "Ready, we can start at any time." Then he waited for the next show to begin. Chapter 307. Colored Glaze and Raito only found out that Filial piety Kanzaki was Iwasaki Leiko's fiancé when they arrived at the scene. They didn't expect that Yoshiyuki would be so generous as to sell his son to Iwasaki as a son-in-law, so they didn't have time to deal with filial piety. But just because they didn't have time to deal with filial piety, it didn't mean that they didn't have time to do something else. After all, in this engagement banquet, the bride's identity was definitely Iwasaki Leiko, so Raito had already asked Sensible to dig up everything about this woman, and unexpectedly found out a lot of interesting things. Iwasaki Leiko, 39 years old this year. As the eldest daughter of Iwasaki Yanosuke, she grew up in a wealthy family and was coaxed like a little princess, so her personality and hobbies were very bad. Just how bad was her personality? Usually, when she moved, she would yell at people, throw things everywhere, and she even liked to grab a bunch of strong men to whip them, drop candles, and sit on the strong men as stools. To put it simply, Iwasaki Leiko was a pervert, almost as perverted as Linhana, but her appearance and temperament were not even 1% of Linhana's, and her personality was even worse, the kind that made people unable to like her at all. Hey, so this is my fiancé, how should I treat him when I go back tonight? Hiss, with a newly ordered whip. On the second floor of the Iwasaki mansion, Leiko looked at the pale fiancé standing next to her, unconsciously licked her lips, and then threw a coquettish glance at filial piety. What the f*ck, after being winked at by his fiancé, filial piety only felt his stomach churning, and he almost vomited on the ground in front of his father-in-law and the guests below. What was even more terrifying was that when the couple stood together on the stage, a large projection screen slid down from the wall behind them. It began to play the love memoirs of the two people from their first meeting, to their first meeting, to their first love, to their first love. However, if one was slightly knowledgeable, one would know that the scene on the screen was obviously created with special effects. Although it was the work of a professional, it was still fake, and one could see the flaws if one looked closely. Filial piety himself was dizzy watching it. After all, he clearly remembered that today was the first time he met Leiko, and the two of them didn't even speak much, so how did they create a love memoir? Public execution. For the current filial piety Kanzaki, he felt that he was being executed in an inhumane way. The most terrifying thing was that this public execution had just started. The actual execution was the actual execution, after Sensible started. At the same time, just as the screen began to play the love memoirs of the two, Sensible, who was in a house not far away, smiled sinisterly as he pressed the buttons on the rows of computers and special devices in front of him, transmitting the signal. Asterisk whoosh. Asterisk the next moment, the scene on the screen changed. Originally, Koiki Kanzaki and Leiko Iwasaki's sweet love story was playing on the screen. However, the screen suddenly flashed as a different video appeared on it. The moment they saw the video, everyone except for Raito and Colored Glaze were stunned. This was because an extremely exaggerated scene was currently being displayed on the huge projection screen. It was a scene of several strong and muscular men kneeling on the ground one after another as they were violently whipped by an expired young miss who was wearing a skin-tight leather jacket that weighed over 200 kilograms. The most ridiculous thing was that the scion wearing a leather jacket was waving her whip while shouting, "Ha ha ha, isn't this great? This is the favor that Leiko-sama has given you. Hurry up and shout." After hearing the words of Leiko-sama, the muscular men who were being whipped also shouted, "Long live Leiko-sama. Leiko-sama is awesome." Along with the majestic and orderly shouts, the unsightly scene on the screen continued to play. Iwasaki Yanosuke, who was standing on the second floor with his back facing the screen, noticed that something was wrong. When he turned around, his face instantly turned green. What a joke! Where is this? Who is standing there? This is the home of the president of the Great Nippon Bank, Golden Heron Iwasaki Yanosuke, and also his daughter's engagement ceremony. The people sitting in the hall below were all influential people in the country. But in such a solemn and grand ceremony, Iwasaki's daughter Leiko's. Some of the more exciting videos. The moment Iwasaki saw the video, he couldn't help but take half a step back and almost fell to the ground. But he still hurriedly shouted at his subordinate, "Turn it off. Hurry up and turn it off." I'm sorry. I'm already turning it off. But I can't turn it off." When the subordinate in charge of controlling the screen heard the boss's words, he was sweating profusely as he typed on the keyboard in his hand. The screen was controlled by a computer not far away, but no matter how the subordinate entered the commands through the keyboard, the computer seemed to be stuck and didn't move at all. Of course, it didn't move at all. Sensible had already used hacking methods to intercept the computer's transmission signal and replaced it with the video he stole from Iwasaki Leiko's computer. For a moment, the hall was in chaos, but other than the sound on the screen and Iwasaki's roar, there was basically no other sound. If it was a normal banquet, the guests in the hall would have already started to laugh, or even take out their phones to take photos and videos. But after all, the guests this time weren't ordinary people. When they saw the disgusting scene on the screen, they were stunned for a moment, then they tried their best to nonchalantly drink tea as if they didn't see anything. There was no doubt that Iwasaki had been tricked this time, and it was premeditated. He had been tricked ruthlessly. At this time, Leiko was trembling in fear on the second floor, her kimono was almost wet, and filial piety was lying on the ground next to her, being subjected to chest compressions as if he had just taken a trip to the gates of hell. Everyone knew that today's incident would become the biggest stain in Iwasaki Yarosuke's life, and it would become a big joke in the upper-class society. Almost 10 seconds later, another staff member reacted and said, "Pull out the power. Pull out the power. Yes. Yes. Power." Finally, the group of staff members who were so anxious that they were about to pee their pants hurriedly pulled out the wires of the screen, and the unsightly scene finally turned black. The next moment, the huge hall was silent. The guests looked at Iwasaki Yarosuke, who couldn't even maintain the smile on his face, and they didn't know what to do. However, at this moment, a burst of crisp applause came from a corner of the hall. The applause didn't sound loud, but it was especially ear-piercing in this deathly silent hall. Who is so bold? People looked in disbelief and saw a young man wearing a white shirt embroidered with a black dragon laughing and clapping, as if he didn't take Iwasaki seriously at all. And this young man who was so presumptuous that it left people speechless was naturally the biggest villain here, Tong Sheng-ryu. Fart. Ha 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 ha. Wonderful, wonderful. It's so wonderful. Under the dumbfounded gazes of hundreds of people, Long Do clapped his hands and laughed. This guy did it. This guy must have done it. When they saw Raito's unscrupulous performance, most of the people present suddenly realized why there was such a big humiliation at the engagement of Iwasaki's daughter. Iwasaki's intention to deal with the Kamiyoshi was very obvious. Now, he even found a man from the Kamiyoshi to be his son-in-law. Anyone with a discerning eye knew what he wanted to do. It was nothing more than supporting a group of people and suppressing a group of people. Then, the Kamiyoshi would become his dog. And Raito Kiri swaggered in with Kamiyoshi's daughter. It was obvious that he supported the current ruler of the Kamiyoshi, so the two sides were at odds. But even so, no one expected Raito's actions to be so despicable. Playing this kind of video at someone else's daughter's engagement party. How could the Iwasaki family face anyone in the future? For these business and political bosses, they generally didn't do things too ruthlessly. Who knew if there would be a time when they would turn around in the future? But Raito obviously didn't have this concept. If he said F***ck your family, then he meant it. Tong Sheng. Raito. Seeing him laughing unscrupulously at his daughter's engagement party, and laughing because of this kid, Iwasaki Yarosuke couldn't hold it in anymore. He stood at the front of the stage on the second floor angrily, glared at Raito, and shouted, "Be *****. The rule of the underworld is not to implicate family members. How dare you cause trouble at my daughter's engagement party?" After hearing Iwasaki's words, Raito laughed even more happily. He even turned to Colored Glaze and said with a smile, "Is this old guy stupid? His daughter is having an S&M convention outside. What does this have to do with me? Don't tell me I taught him." That's right. Azurite also smiled elegantly and said in front of so many people, "Old Master Iwasaki, instead of saying that someone is messing with you behind your back, it's better to say that you didn't teach your daughter well. Otherwise, how could someone fabricate this video out of thin air? Oh, this be ****starred woman. A mere daughter of Ruehue dares to talk to me like this." After being rebuked by Azurite, Iwasaki's face couldn't help but turn red. It was clear that he could accept the provocation of an extreme boss like Ryudo, but he couldn't accept Kanzaki Azurite's provocation even more. After all, Colored Glaze was Ruehue's daughter, and Ruehue was Iwasaki's subordinate. How could a subordinate's daughter dare to provoke her superior? How could this be? It's fake. That video just now was fake. But Iwasaki was someone who had been through a lot, and he quickly found a way to counterattack. He hurriedly shouted to the guests, "That video just now was a fake video made by someone with a mind of their own using some technical means. I, Iwasaki Yanasuke, swear that I will definitely find the culprit who made this fake video. I will bring him to justice." Originally, with Iwasaki's identity as Golden Heron, if he said that the video was fake, apart from Raito and Colored Glaze, everyone else would only agree, and this matter could be considered to have come to an end. Chapter 308. Looking at the phone in Raito's hand that was obviously recording and had already uploaded the video, almost everyone felt a chill in their hearts. Especially Iwasaki Yarosuke, who was standing on the high platform. He felt completely dumbfounded. How could there be such a person in the world? This is too shameless, too obscene, too hooligan, too, because he wanted to scold Raito too much. Iwasaki felt that his vocabulary seemed to be a little lacking. Suddenly, Kamishiro Yoshiyuki, who was sitting next to Raito, couldn't help but ask with his mouth wide open, You uploaded the video just now to the internet?" "Yeah, and it was uploaded by dozens of domestic and foreign websites at the same time. I'm afraid even God can't take it back." Speaking of this, Raito couldn't help but smile and patted Yoshiyuki's head, and said with a smile, "Brother, your son's cuckold will soon be known by the world. I suggest you quickly change his name. He. Ua." In an instant, Yoshiyuki trembled with anger. After pointing at Raito with a trembling hand, he couldn't help but faint on the spot. Thump. Although Yoshiyuki fell to the ground, no one in the surrounding hall seemed to care about him because everyone was shocked by Raito's actions. Even if they knew in advance that Raito and Colored Glaze came here with the intention of falling out with Iwasaki, they didn't expect them to be so ruthless. This combination of punches really made Iwasaki dizzy, and it also made the bystanders dizzy. Collecting dirt on someone else's daughter, hacking into someone else's computer at their daughter's engagement party, and even recording the various embarrassing moments of Iwasaki's family and uploading them to the internet. Was this something a human would do? What kind of environment was the internet? That was the real sea of stars. No matter what kind of video it was, as long as it was uploaded to the internet, it would never be cleaned up. Not to mention a mere golden heron, even if the entire Yatsuki Crow went bankrupt, they still wouldn't be able to do it. This was not something that humans could do. Great, now it's over. Some of the people present reacted quickly. They even picked up their phones and quickly searched for some of the more popular forums. Sure enough, a post titled "Rich Young Miss Likes Fierce Men" publicly exposed her ugly behavior during her engagement banquet had already appeared on those forums along with a video. Moreover, many netizens began to comment crazily after reading it. "What kind of rich young lady is this? You look like a pig, but you like to play with whips. What a strong taste. Ha ha ha." But it's too tragic that it was broadcasted at the engagement ceremony. Her husband was so angry that he fell to the ground. Wait, isn't that old man Iwasaki Yanasuke? Iwasaki Yanasuke? The CEO of the great Japanese bank? One of the top 10 richest men in Japan? Really? Sigh. It seems to be true. The young lady of the Iwasaki family looks like this. Aren't there photos online? Netizens were creatures that were most passionate about all kinds of new and interesting gossip. Especially this kind of gossip that happened in a rich family, and it was very exciting. It would greatly arouse the netizens' desire to comment and spread it. After all, the Iwasaki family was a famous family in Japan. Iwasaki Yanasuke and Iwasaki Leiko were also characters who often appeared on TV and in news reports. It was not difficult to find their identity information and make comparisons. Therefore, in just a few minutes, the enthusiastic netizens dug out all the identities of the protagonists in the video, and then crazily spread the video to their friends, friends of friends, and friends of friends of friends. At this speed, in less than an hour, the entire Tokyo and even the entire Japan should know that the CEO of the great Japanese bank was exposed at the engagement banquet. In other words, Iwasaki Yanosuke, Iwasaki Leiko, and her cuckolded husband, filial piety Kanzaki, instantly became popular on the internet. The dignified top tycoon in Japan, who had dominated the business world for decades, suddenly became a monkey, and was watched by all the netizens in Japan. The current situation on the internet was really exciting. As for Iwasaki Yanosuke, who was at home and had already thought about how all of this would quickly develop, he took a deep breath, then picked up the microphone next to him. "Distinguished guests, I'm very sorry," Iwasaki first said, then did a very shocking action in front of everyone. He slowly lowered his body, then knelt down in front of the guests below, and kowtowed deeply to the ground. When he realized that his godly bow might not be able to handle this situation, Iwasaki used his final trump card, kneeling. But it had to be said that with his identity as the Golden Heron kneeling down in front of guests of lower status, it was still very powerful. Lord Iwasaki? He actually knelt down in front of us in this kind of situation? When they saw his short white hair, most of the guests who were secretly cancelling were also shocked by this extremely solemn action. After kneeling for a few seconds, Iwasaki raised his head slightly and said to the microphone handed over by his subordinate, "I'm just an ordinary father, poor parents, I'm sure everyone here is the same, right? Regarding the misfortune of my daughter's family, I hope everyone can be magnanimous, please don't mention it again." "Very good, it's recorded." At this time, Iwasaki was kneeling on the ground and speaking in an almost begging tone, while he secretly looked at his subordinate who was recording. As a veteran in the business world, Iwasaki knew how to deal with this kind of crisis. First apologize, second bow, third kneel. This was the most common and most effective method. For the majority of Japanese, they didn't have the idea of paying the price for doing something wrong, they just wanted to see a group of people who were usually high and mighty lower their heads, bow and kowtow to a group of lowly commoners like them. So in the past, whether it was the business world or the political world, as long as there was a problem, they would bow, and if there was a big problem, they would kowtow. Usually, after bowing and kowtowing, no one would pursue the matter. Anyway, the Japanese were this short-sighted, they didn't want to solve the problem, they only wanted to see a group of high and mighty people apologize with snot and tears, then they would be satisfied. As for whether the problem was solved or not, it wasn't important, what was important was that the people were happy. Therefore, the current Iwasaki grasped this point, grasped the Japanese's unique gene of valuing small gifts but not righteousness, and used this trump card of kneeling. Quick, look. Quick. I, the CEO of the great Japanese bank, knelt down, even if my daughter was involved in S&M, whipped people, and was suddenly exposed at the engagement ceremony, you should forget about it, there's no need to mention it again. Originally, for Iwasaki and the great Japanese bank, this was undoubtedly a super shameful incident, the kind that might even cause him to step down directly. But after kneeling down and posting the video on the internet, not only did I not need to step down, I even gained the image of a pitiful father, and with some packaging on the internet, wouldn't I be able to take off directly? When he kowtowed again and knelt down for the second time, the corners of Iwasaki's mouth, which was almost stuck to the ground, had already curled up. It was as if he could already see the scene of his whitewashing of the misfortune of a rich CEO, the pitiful father washing his face with tears rapidly spreading across the country. To be able to turn a fatal blow of humiliation into a helping hand, Iwasaki Yanosuke's position as the Golden Heron wasn't without reason. His brain worked fast, and his skin was thick enough. When the old man said these sentimental words and kowtowed to the guests again, the guests below quickly found a direction to echo. Lord Iwasaki, raise your head, this isn't your fault. That's right, what's wrong with a young lady having some special hobbies before getting married? It's normal. It would be better to say that the problem lies with those people who purposely chose to cause trouble during other people's wedding ceremonies. That's too despicable. For a moment, The guests began to comfort Iwasaki, and some people even began to ridicule Raito, who was also in the center of public opinion. After hearing the gossip, Colored Glaze smiled and said, "Oh, isn't he quite capable? He turned the tables in an instant. Indeed. His skin is so thick, no wonder he can be in a high position in this country." Long Do couldn't help but want to clap a few more times when he saw the old man's quick reaction. He praised the old man's thick skin, which even internal force might not be able to penetrate. After all, the old man's skin had probably been tempered into steel. However, after Iwasaki's response, the momentum that was disadvantageous to him had dissipated by quite a bit. Many of the guests had also slowly left. Long Do and Azurite were also led by the attendants to the third floor of the mansion. There were 11 other men and women of different identities who came with them to the balcony on the third floor. From the looks of it, Raito's second father-in-law, Tsukujiri Kyoji, who was very familiar with him, this should be the current Dark Crow group. Originally, there were 12 people in the middle class of Yatsuki, but because Rui Hui said she was sick and didn't come, there were only 11 people left, including Kyoji. When he saw Raito, Kyoji obviously couldn't help but clench his teeth slightly. Obviously, he was still somewhat resentful of this future son-in-law. After realizing this, Colored Glaze couldn't help but laugh. "It seems that your future father-in-law doesn't like you, hey? It's okay, my future wife likes me, anyway. The one who wants to be with me is not him, but Yun Yang." After being bitten by Raito like this, Colored Glaze couldn't help but groan, feeling like she was hit in the head with a stick. However, as the two of them chatted and laughed, it didn't take long for everyone to pass through a corridor with all kinds of infrared scanning, metal detection, facial recognition, and other security devices. Then, a particularly heavy door on the third floor of the Iwasaki mansion slowly opened, welcoming the group of Dark Crows inside. This also indicated that after the small skirmish just now, the real battle was about to begin. Chapter 309. However, behind the heavy door, there was a rather spacious circular hall. In the middle of the hall, there was a huge circular hollow table, and in the middle of the round table, there was a referee's table that was obviously of a higher level. Not only that, but at the 12 corners of the round table, which were the 12 o'clock positions, there were many chairs, and there was a green button and a red button in front of the table. The green and red buttons obviously represented support and oppose. On the side of the button, there was a tall screen that prevented others from seeing which side the person who pressed the button had chosen. Just by looking at this special configuration, it was obvious that this thing was most likely used for voting. After all, voting was often required in various meetings, including this one. The Yatsuki meeting was usually started by 1 or more golden herons and 8 or more dark crows. For a meeting where all 12 dark crows were present, it was usually to discuss some relatively important matters, such as this Kamiyoshi incident. When all 12 dark crows were seated, Colored Glaze also sat in Kaneshiro Rui's seat, while Raito stood behind her. "Good lord, you didn't prepare a seat for me? Yatsuki, you're so poor." Looking at the round table in front of him and the host golden heron Iwasaki Yanasuke, who was sitting in the middle of the round table like a referee's seat, Raito couldn't help but show a mocking smile. Colored Glaze smiled and said, "Bear with it, anyway, it'll be over soon. Mitch, at least you know your place." After hearing the conversation between the two, Iwasaki Yanasuke sneered and said, "Since everyone is here, let's start today's topic. I'm sure everyone already knows what we're going to discuss today, and that is, it's about me and the Kamiyoshi, right?" Before Iwasaki finished speaking, Colored Glaze, who was sitting in the Kamiyoshi seat, interrupted him and said in advance. Although everyone present knew about this topic, judging from Colored Glaze's current attitude, she didn't seem to care about this topic at all. Is this kid crazy? Does she think that I and the other 11 dark crows can't deal with them? After hearing Colored Glaze's confident words, Iwasaki Yanasuke sneered, then said to everyone, "The Kamiyoshi has always been proud of the excellent tradition of the Zaiwang. The successor of the Zaiwang must be a pure and flawless girl, but it seems that someone doesn't care about this excellent tradition." Before he could finish his sentence, everyone at the table turned to look at Liu Li, who was sitting in her seat, and then looked at Long Do, who was standing behind her. After Iwasaki Yanasuke finished speaking, he took out a lot of deliberately enlarged photos from the document bag on the table and raised them one by one for all the Dark Crows members to take a look. In those photos, there were only two people, namely Raito and Colored Glaze. Judging from the background and movements, they were basically secretly photographed in school. When they were secretly photographed, the two were either holding hands, standing on each other's shoulders, or leaning intimately against each other. In fact, Colored Glaze and Raito usually didn't avoid each other in school. As long as one had the intention, it wasn't difficult to secretly take photos of the two of them. It could even be said that it was very simple, so the two of them weren't surprised at all by these photos. After the photos were made public, Iwasaki continued to add, according to the excellent tradition of the Kamiyoshi, the Zaiwon candidates of each generation will deliberately keep a distance from men, so it's impossible for such a shameless thing to happen. So, Colored Glaze raised her eyebrows, but she didn't have much of a reaction. So I have reason to suspect that this generation's main god, Dai Ruehue, is not governing properly, especially when it comes to the discipline of the next Zaiwang. She should retreat behind the scenes and let someone with the ability to govern take over. At this point, Iwasaki looked at the Kamiyoshi Ruehue sign in front of Colored Glaze, and then looked at Raito who was standing behind Ruehue. A fierce expression appeared in his eyes. Before this, Iwasaki only wanted to suppress and control the Kamiyoshi because Ruehue was controlling the Black Hand Alliance behind the scenes. It was purely out of consideration for benefits. However, after Raito obviously played such a trick on them and almost destroyed the reputation that Iwasaki's name had accumulated over the years, it wasn't just a matter of consideration for benefits between the two sides. Iwasaki's personal grudge was also mixed in. Raito Kiri, just you wait. When Kamiyoshi Ruehue and her daughter's authority is stripped away and there's no one left to protect you, this old man will work with the Yatsuki to wipe out your Black Hand Alliance completely. When Iwasaki thought of how this bastard Kudo would die without a burial place, his lips curled up in a sinister arc, and the fake smile on his face became even brighter. At this moment, the president of the Tsukujiri group, Tsukujiri Kyoji, who was sitting beside him, pushed up his glasses and placed his hands on the table to support his chin. Then, he asked in a serious tone, "Lord Iwasaki, are you proposing to remove Kamiyoshi from power?" In the Yatsuki structure, the Golden Heron was the highest structure. They had the right to propose any proposal, and they could even request for the removal of the Dark Crow leader. However, a proposal was just a proposal. Even the Golden Heron couldn't decide everything with one hand. Otherwise, what would be the Dark Crows for? According to the rules, when the Golden Heron proposed a proposal, the Dark Crows would need to vote. 2/3 of the Dark Crows would approve the proposal. This was one of the Dark Crow's powers. That's right. After hearing Kyoji's words, Iwasaki Yanasuke slammed the table and said in a serious tone, "Saiwang is one of the most important members of the Yatsuki. If something happens to Saiwang, it will severely affect the reputation of the Yatsuki. This is a serious matter." Fut. Suddenly, Raito couldn't help but laugh. "Just say it. Just say that you don't like me and Lady Ruehue, and you want to kill us. You are indeed one of the main reasons. You're just an extreme hooligan, yet you actually want to use the Kanzaki family as a springboard to enter the upper class. You don't know what you're talking about. We will never allow such a thing to happen." Iwasaki Yanasuke had a mocking smile on his face, and he pointed at the hooligan. From the beginning to the end, Iwasaki's impression of Raito was that he was a piece of trash trying to enter the upper class by hooking up with the Kamiyoshi lady. The reason why Kanzaki and Colored Glaze were together with Raito Kiri was because they each wanted what they needed. The Colored Glaze and her daughter needed the Black Hand Alliance, and Raito needed the Kamiyoshi clan's support. But when faced with Iwasaki's responsibility, Raito paused for a moment, then he couldn't help but laugh out loud. Fut fut fut. Ha 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 ha. His laughter sounded very heroic, but if one listened carefully, one could feel a strong sense of mockery. This made Iwasaki's face darken. You still dare to laugh at a time like this? You'll know how you're going to die in a moment. After taking a deep breath, Iwasaki said to the 11 Raven members around him, "Everyone, we can start the voting now. Those who agree with the dismissal of Kanzaki Rui, please press the green button. Those who disagree, please press the red button." 11 Raven members. If more than 2/3 of them agreed, 8 of them would be in favor of the decision. Iwasaki was very confident in this vote. After all, he was the Golden Heron. In the Yatsuki system, although the Golden Heron was only responsible for proposing the motion, and the Raven was responsible for voting, this so-called voting was just a formality most of the time. It should be known that in the past, more than 90% of the motions proposed by the Golden Heron passed safely. After all, the Golden Heron was actually the Raven's superior. Unless it was something related to their interests, the Raven would usually not vote against the motion. And this time, because the motion involved the Kamiyoshi, colored glaze naturally wouldn't participate in the voting. After Iwasaki finished speaking, the other 11 people almost didn't hesitate to reach their hands into the voting machine that was surrounded by obstructions. The buttons couldn't be seen, and they pressed the buttons. When everyone pressed the buttons, the results would be transmitted to the electronic panel around the host seat in the middle, so that everyone could see the voting results clearly. 3, 2, 1. Beep. Finally, accompanied by a crisp electronic sound, the voting results that Iwasaki Yarosuke had been waiting for were displayed. According to Iwasaki's knowledge, the only person who could possibly vote against the motion was Tsukujiri Kyoji. This Tsukujiri Group CEO had a good relationship with Kanzaki Rui, and his wife seemed to be best friends with Kanzaki Rui. It wasn't strange for him to oppose the removal of Kanzaki Rui's power. However, the other 10 people only had some business dealings with the Kanzaki family. Some of them didn't even have any dealings with the Kanzaki family. It was basically impossible for them to take the risk of offending the Golden Heron by voting against the Kanzaki family. However, the results displayed on the electronic panel surprised Iwasaki a little. Because after the electronic screen flashed, the result displayed was 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock, which meant that all the 11 Ravens present chose to press the same button, including Tsukujiri Kyoji. Oh, I didn't expect that guy to be so sensible. He didn't risk condemnation and vote for Rui, but that's what a smart guy is. Thinking of this, Iwasaki Yarosuke nodded slightly. But the moment he nodded, he saw all the contents on the electronic screen. Then, the old man in his 70s was dumbfounded. The votes were 11 o'clock, Iwasaki didn't see it wrong. But what he didn't see at first glance was that the 11 votes on the electronic screen were actually flashing red dot. In other words, the votes cast by the Ravens this time were all against Iwasaki Yarosuke's motion. Chapter 310. The moment he saw the final result, the smile on Iwasaki Yarosuke's face instantly collapsed, and his body trembled unconsciously. Yes, trembling. This old man who worked hard in the business world for his entire life and finally reached the highest position among businessmen, Yatsuki Kaneki, couldn't control his emotions for a moment. His pair of slightly cloudy pupils suddenly widened as he stared at the 11 o'clock on the electronic screen. It was as if he saw the scene of the end of the world. How is this possible? Are my eyes playing tricks on me? No, did the machine malfunction? If it's possible, I should immediately ask someone to check the machine, and then, just as Iwasaki was about to ask someone to check the machine, the scene that he suddenly saw sent a chill down his spine. When Iwasaki, who was in the middle of the host seat, raised his head, Iwasaki was met with a lot of strange gazes. Starting from Kyoji in Tsukujiri, they turned clockwise all the way to the left. Some people's gazes became evasive, while the other half's gazes were somewhat cold. As for the most important people, Colored Glaze and Raito, one had a calm expression, while the other had a strange smile on his face. They didn't have a trace of surprise from such a large disparity in the score. I fell into their trap, they planned this beforehand. After noticing such an abnormal state, Iwasaki immediately understood in his heart. A score of 11 o'clock rarely appeared under normal circumstances, because it was rare for all 11 people to agree. After all, the members of Raven came from all walks of life, and they had different standpoints. Therefore, there was no requirement that the motion must be passed by all members. Instead, they chose a system where 2/3 of the members agreed. However, this time, when it came to the voting motion of the Kamiyoshi, everyone's attitude was the same. They all opposed the removal of Kaneki Ruehue from the position of the leader. In other words, they all stood on the opposite side of Iwasaki, who proposed the motion. There was only one reason for this situation, and that was that the Kamiyoshi and the Black Hand Alliance, these two huge forces, did something behind the scenes. A mistake, a huge mistake. The moment he thought of this, Iwasaki suddenly realized where he made a mistake. On one hand, he underestimated the abilities of Ruehue, Colored Glaze, and Raito. On the other hand, he shouldn't have given them 3 days to prepare. That's right, these 3 days were crucial. If it wasn't for these 3 days, this vote wouldn't have such a shocking result. Just as Iwasaki thought, in these 3 days, Ruehue, Colored Glaze, and Raito used different methods to secretly establish relationships with the other Raven members, and had already predicted the result of this vote. Among the 12 Dark Crows, Ruehue had a good relationship with 2 other Dark Crows other than Kyoji. After some negotiations, she obtained 2 no votes at the cost of providing some help in the form of connections. Not to mention Kyoji himself, since his daughter Yunyang and Raito came back from Paris together, anyone who wasn't an idiot could see that the two had already had sex. Kyoji only had one daughter, so what else could he say? In desperation, Kyoji could only agree with Raito, this bastard son-in-law. Therefore, needless to say, he also used his connections to persuade another Raven member to help vote against the proposal. In addition to Kyoji, Raito's other father-in-law, Saitu Tokahiro, also helped a lot. Although Saitu Dojo wasn't a member of the Yatsuki Crow organization, they had a lot of connections with the upper class. Therefore, with Tokahiro's help, Saitu Dojo also persuaded another Raven member to help vote against the proposal. That was a total of 5 votes. With these 5 votes, Iwasaki's proposal could be said to be completely useless, because it was impossible for him to gather 2/3 of the votes to pass the proposal. But it wasn't enough, it was far from enough. After obtaining 5 of the votes, Longdo and Lioli were still moving in the dark, in order to obtain the remaining 6 votes as well. To reject the proposal, there was no difference between 5 votes and 11 votes, but there was a big difference on a deeper level. If it was just 5 votes, it would show that Iwasaki's influence was still there, and there were still 6 ravens willing to follow his footsteps. This wasn't the result that Colored Glaze wanted. Ever since that Golden Heron was ready to attack the Kanzaki family, the only thing Lioli wanted to achieve was to make Iwasaki Yanasuke disappear completely, making him disappear along with his huge influence. In order to completely destroy Iwasaki's influence, the process of obtaining the next 6 votes was more or less shady. 2 of the 6 votes were obtained with the help of Sensible and Gao Yuan. The 2 of them had targeted one of the Raven individuals and companies and obtained some criminal evidence of their individual or company. From there, they threatened them. If they voted against the Kamiyoshi in the next proposal, then they should wash their butts and prepare to go to jail. After obtaining the evidence, that was how Colored Glaze threatened them. As long as the evidence was made public, even Iwasaki and Yatsuki wouldn't be able to protect them. After all, under the influence of someone with ulterior motives, this kind of criminal evidence would spread like wildfire across the country, and it would be impossible to extinguish it. After this threat, 2 votes were naturally obtained. As for the remaining 4 votes, the Dark Crows did not have any similar evidence to use. Thus, they could only resort to more violent methods. Before this meeting started, Raito arranged for the Rulong Security Company's elite Dragon Fang squad to kidnap the parents, wives, and children of the 4 ravens as much as possible, and use them as a threat against the 4 ravens. The kidnapping process sounded simple, but there was a lot of undercurrents. However, thanks to the elite strength of the Dragon Fang squad, they succeeded in achieving their goal in the end. A threat, this was even more of a threat, and it was the most despicable kind of threat to use one's family. But even so, Colored Glaze didn't hesitate at all when arranging this. In order to obtain the final victory, she was willing to do anything. Since their families were in the hands of others, the remaining 4 ravens had nothing to say, and were forced to vote against the proposal. After all, Iwasaki only wanted to take action against the Kanzaki family. Essentially, it had nothing to do with him. He couldn't possibly sacrifice his family's life just to take down someone who had nothing to do with him. That would be far too foolish. By the time the last 4 ravens changed sides, the votes of the 11 ravens were all in the hands of Colored Glaze. Thus, the ridiculous everyone changed sides scene just now happened. That's it, that's the result I wanted. Seeing the golden heron standing in the middle of the round table with her eyes wide open in shock, Colored Glaze, who was sitting in her seat like an empress, asked calmly, "Iwasaki-sama, can you announce the result of the proposal?" Kanzaki Colored Glaze. You. Seeing Colored Glaze acting as if she was the master of this place and didn't care about him at all, Iwasaki knew that he had completely lost this battle and couldn't help but point his finger at her. But in the next moment, Iwasaki couldn't help but cover his heart with his hand. At the same time, he felt as if he couldn't breathe properly. No matter how good Iwasaki's treatment was, he was only an old man in his 70s, so it was natural for his body to have some problems. Now that he was faced with such a tragic situation of everyone betraying him, and after being angered by a junior like Colored Glaze, he almost fainted on the spot. He could only support himself with his hand on the table and barely maintain his high and mighty posture. But even so, it was his duty to announce the result. So Iwasaki Yanasuke could only clench his chest and gnash his teeth as he said, "This motion is not passed. The meeting is over. Dismissed." In the end, after holding his breath and saying dismissed, Iwasaki hurriedly opened a small door next to the round table and quickly left the conference room. It was as if he would die from anger if he looked at Colored Glaze and Raito's expressions. Just like that, the meeting that was supposed to send Rui Hui and her daughter to hell ended with a weak ending, and it ended with the Golden Heron being defeated. For Iwasaki, this battle could be said to be a complete loss for him, and it might even become a nightmare that repeatedly appeared in the dreams of the president of the Great Nippon Bank. After the meeting ended, the 4 dark crows who were threatened also hurriedly found Raito. One of them said to him with a somewhat gloomy face, "Boss Tong Sheng, now that we have voted, can you release our families? Of course, I promise no one will hurt a single hair on their heads." Raito took out his phone on the spot, clicked on the call, and said, "Send everyone back respectfully, remember, be polite." After knowing that their families were fine, the 4 dark crows finally breathed a sigh of relief. They quickly followed Iwasaki's footsteps and left, as if they wanted to give some explanation to the Golden Heron. "Is this okay? Although you won this meeting, you also offended a lot of people." Looking at the backs of the 4 dark crows, Gong Sai, who came to the 2, couldn't help but say, "The kidnapping and extortion method that Liu Li used this time could only be used once at most. If the next meeting was held, they would definitely not fall for it so easily. Moreover, the favor card that they had played previously might not be fully effective. In other words, as long as Iwasaki still held the position of Golden Heron, then he could make a comeback at any time and launch attacks on the Kamiyoshi from all directions. No problem, Iwasaki won't be around for long. You should prepare yourself, the next Golden Heron-sama." Raito reached out and patted his father-in-law's shoulder and gave him a handsome thumbs up. "You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."